You're listening to Well, I Laughed, Part 1 of Friend or Foe, Tree Hugger. So, you know how Starbucks had those, like, cold brew, sweet cream pumpkin drinks in the fall?
Yeah.
And how it's always, like, cold brew, and then the top, like, inch
Sweet
is
foam,
sweet
yeah.
foam cream? Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I love just taking the cap off and treating it like a Frappuccino and just having a little bit of sweet cream and then being like, all right, well, let's have some coffee now.
That's fair, I guess.
If you're wondering what inspired that story, don't worry about it. No, it sounds more scandalous than it actually is.
Yep.
Hi.
Hello.
Let's talk about last night, okay? A couple things happened, friends. Hi, we're jumping into it right away. First, and only because he's still in the room, Casey's homophobic. Last night, June 1st, we're recording
That's
June 2nd.
a joke for legal reasons.
Sure. Or, you know, are we worried he's going to quit?
No, just people that
Casey's-
love Casey, listen.
That's right, Michelle does listen.
Yes.
So, last night, June 1st, our friend Danny hosts a Pride kickoff party, and the entire group's there, all showing out, except Casey.
And Hayden.
Right, the nurse who was working 7 days in a row also couldn't go.
Casey has things. We all have different limits
I love
that
how
we can.
undefensible it is that not a full sentence yet. Listen, if this is debate cross-examination, I'd be like, thank you. My next question.
I've just learned not to come at him when he's not feeling social.
Maya learns empathy at age 25.
I
It's
learned
possible for
empathy-
your boyfriends too, listener.
Because he's not mean to me like you are. Although he did say something really mean to me yesterday. Do you remember what I told you?
Do. Go ahead and share it right now in front of everybody.
Casey and I went to.
Go ahead.
Are
No,
you
it's
dying?
good. It's great. It's great.
Casey and I went to the women's national team game, the soccer game in Colorado with Kelsey and Edgar yesterday. And I was joking around that we were talking about how after the game sometimes the players come back out and sign jerseys and stuff. And so I like leaned in over to Casey and was like, do you think they would sign my forehead? And Casey just looked at me and like contemplated for a second. He went, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of space up there. Okay. Say it to my face.
Which part?
Yeah. The fifth head.
Welcome to being bald, by the way. I like how you had one moment of facial skin discrimination.
I have so much hair, Grant.
One moment of facial skin discrimination, and you're like, this is awful. I want to remind you in June of last year when we were just posting these and we were just beginning, someone said in our comments in our still most successful video ever, damn, you could fit all 7 continents on his bald head.
Okay, I have hair, Grant.
And a forehead. So let's go ahead and keep being mean to Maya for a second.
Attacked right now.
So we are at Danny's Pride party last night, and then of course there's a moment where we're like, let's make moves to go get tacos.
By the way, I had been asking for us to leave to go get tacos because my plan was to go home after tacos, and I was told we would be leaving around 10:30.
Right.
When did we actually leave to get tacos,
The
Grant?
time that I intended us, because I knew you were going to leave.
11:30.
Right, because I knew you were going to leave after we got tacos, so I kept you in the game as long as possible.
Listen.
Put me in, coach.
Yeah, trying to get this group out the door was damn near impossible. And no,
What?
it
Us
wasn't
at a
because
Pride party?
it wasn't because of Jacob and Lydia. It wasn't because of Sophie, the host of the party. It wasn't because of Danny, also the host of the party. It wasn't because of Tyler, who's impossible to get places. No, herding cats consisted of only herding Grant. Everyone else was out the door. Lydia and I took turns getting him to leave.
If you had said this 48 hours ago, I would feel bad, but it's June, and I'm not carrying guilt with me this month. So anyways, we're walking to... It's Pride Month. We're walking to go get tacos, right? And, you know, we're on a sidewalk, so we kind of break out into, like, little Noah's Ark pairs, right? Kind of, like, stretch down the hallway... Not the hallway, the sidewalk, as everyone has their own, like, mini conversations. And then you just hear this, like... kind coming from the grass, and I think every other person understands sprinklers are about to turn on. But Maya essentially jumps into Tyler's arms as Tyler runs away, because Maya was concerned that she had found the world's largest rattlesnake. There, in downtown Denver at midnight, was when the world's largest rattlesnake on a very popular sidewalk was gonna get her. And as the person who got a chance to watch it happen, knowing what was going on, knowing the reaction, I had to sit down from laughing so hard.
The best part is Tyler and I were like quite a bit ahead of everyone else, so no one else had even gotten to the grass yet. So I was just so concerned, and I wanted to push Tyler out of the way with me as I was going. By the time I even got near Tyler, Tyler was gone. Tyler was not even around to help. And I don't think my knees or my feet have ever moved that far off the ground simultaneously before.
I want you to point out, here's how like urban and dense and just like in the middle of the city, this street is that we're on.
We were by the Capitol.
When we walked back, there was a woman and her boyfriend having a very loud argument that resulted in both of them punching their own car. Like, you were just like, city life, you know? Oh, did you not? You were probably taking an Uber at that point. That's news to you. Yeah, no, we had to take a little detour just to give them their space. But yeah, like, city life in the big city, being city girls with our city lives.
And almost getting attacked by a snake. That's all. That's all I wanted you to hear. It was very entertaining. Casey's not impressed.
He also has had no response to my homophobia accusations, so...
He doesn't need to respond. He just knows that you're just trying to get a rise out of him. And he knows better. Taught him
Have
well.
you seen this? There's this whole TikTok trend right now where the creator of the main account like stands in the corner with his arms crossed, and his friend is like, no, like he plays tennis. That's why he wears those shorts. He's not gay. And it's like my besties in middle school defending me from accusations I cannot beat. Huge vibe right now as well. He just doesn't, he knows, he just doesn't want to give you a reaction. Like, that's why he is the way that he is.
I mean, it's true.
Listen, we have a lot of incredible women who listen to us
Speaking
from
of
the
incredible
Midwest.
women, though, really quick.
And they also have to defend their homophobic boyfriends.
Yeah,
so they
it's
get
true.
it.
It's true.
Sorry, what were you going to say? Incredible women.
I have never heard a woman mansplain as hard as I heard a woman mansplain soccer to, I think, her boyfriend yesterday at the women's national team match.
Move to Denver.
And that is the only time when I am in the United States outside of this podcast where I will, and I'm proud to be an American. We scored 4-0.
Hell
We won 4-0
what
against South
country
Korea.
did South Korea? Okay.
And it was just a friendly game, so we didn't even have our best players out. I learned a lot yesterday.
God, just like the way I would just make geopolitical comments the entire time. I wouldn't be fun, but I'd have a great time. I love snacks.
It was weird. The South Korean team, they seemed cold the entire game. Like at one point they're...
I was in like not warmed up.
No, like cold.
Like mean?
Like cold. Like they were temperature cold.
I was like, what are you, like you just seemed
It
like
was
not
like,
impressed?
no, it was like 80 degrees, and their goalie was wearing like long sleeves, and that's not on its own like a weird thing. Like sometimes they wear compression stuff, but their medical team that they came out to like check on players a couple times were wearing like full sweatsuits, like not even sleeves rolled up, and it was like hot as shit. It was like 80 degrees, and we were sitting in the sun.
Something I wonder though, because Denver is so dry. Like,
Yeah.
are they just like maybe expecting more humidity? Like, I don't know what it's. I have
don't
no
understand.
idea what the temperature.
Well, we checked the temperature in South Korea on
right.
that day, and it was currently like in the 60s. So I was like, are you okay? Like, what the hell is happening? But there's actually two women on the team, at least two women on the team that played yesterday that were from Colorado, and that was really cool.
Oh, that is really cool.
The one
I
of
love
them
that.
scored the first goal of the game.
My favorite thing, and I know we talked about this earlier in the podcast, but it's when the Winter Olympics are happening, and our local news stations will track if Colorado was a country competing at the Winter Olympics. Because we're a sporty state by nature.
We usually are,
Yes.
yeah.
We can't beat the Norwegians, but we can, like, for the most part, like, keep up with...
We could beat it.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Spain's got nothing on Colorado when it comes to skiing.
Yeah, for running though, probably not the case anymore. But the girl that was like mansplaining behind us, every once in a while she would start like shit talking the Premier League, which if you're not like a huge soccer fan, it's like the top league
Right.
you can play in the UK,
It's
and
like the Premier League.
Yep, it's confusing, except the second league is the championship league.
I know. And it took me an embarrassingly long time to figure it out, but it's still a funny joke. Go ahead.
It is funny, yeah. But she was like talking about how like the way that they trade players is unfair and like there's no cap on spending. And Casey was just like, I was watching his face, and usually he'll eavesdrop, but he doesn't usually show reactions unless I indicate I'm also eavesdropping. And I turned
Power
next
couple.
to him, and Casey just went. Like disgusted, and I was like, what do you think? And he was just like, she's factually incorrect.
I love it. I love Casey being mean because it doesn't come naturally to him. So he almost also seems surprised when he's doing it. It's so funny to watch.
It is really pretty funny.
Let's go ahead and chat a little bit about what today has been like too then. We've had very different days. I'll go first, then you can go second. So I got home late last night, right? Pride party. Woke up early this morning.
Yeah, how late? When did you go to bed?
Probably around 3.
Okay, and then when did you wake up?
Like roughly around like 7:30. I want you to know, so far I have had no food and 4 coffees.
That seems healthy.
2 at my house, 1 at the little coffee thing that I went
now
to,
one
and
here?
then probably a second one here too.
Yeah,
later.
probably, yeah.
Anyways, woke up, did some grad school work. Don't worry, it's kicking my ass. It's just a lot of reading,
Yes.
and then went on. So good. A quick 20-minute hot girl walk for my little Mentee bee. Just absolutely cleared my head. I'm jamming Carly
For
Rae
Mentee
Jepsen.
B or Mentee Health?
Mentee break.
Okay. Oh, okay.
That's how I interpret the B.
Mentee B is, for me, mental breakdown.
Right. I stop at the down
Okay,
part.
okay, cool. I was
Just
like,
a stylistic choice.
I was like, wait.
For my Mentee break, just got. I think it was like. I swear to God, I was not on any drugs, and by that point was sober.
Aside from caffeine.
Right, but I was like legitimately walking around this park, and I was like, oh my God, like, isn't being alive incredible? Like, look at how shiny and bright and beautiful the sky is. And because it's Colorado, I'm like, there are the mountains, and like, look at that family playing Frisbee right now. Like, isn't it just so cool that we're all doing this together?
The way I have never. Holy shit.
I know. It's almost embarrassing to say out loud. But I was like, God, like, I think at the end of the day, like, I possess infinite multitudes, and I've never really had an issue that I got myself into that I couldn't get myself out of. And I know I'm grateful right now, and it's probably selfish to want to continue to hold on to this emotion for really long. So I'm just going to really appreciate the moment I have right now. And talk about it on the podcast later.
What else did you do today, Grant?
Well, then I got home and I was like, okay, so now here's the challenge of my day. How do I pick an outfit that works for both a coffee hangout with a good friend, a podcast recording session in the afternoon, maybe some Shake Shack, I'm getting a little hungry, in the evening, and then we're going to Company, the revival version that's touring right now, at the Denver Performing Arts Center later on tonight. And so I'm like, what works in all those situations? And then I was like, that's right, I was gifted a new Hawaiian shirt by my mom. I'll cut the tags off, put that on, loved how it looked on me, and I was like, okay, champ, let's go get this. And then I drove, and so now I'm here. Oh, I mean after the coffee hangout, and now I'm here. And then there's like 2 more things, and then I'll go to bed, and then I'll wake up in the morning and do a lot of grad work again. But that's okay.
I like that as you started talking, you got faster.
I mean, it's just like so wonderful, you know?
I woke up 2 hours ago.
And it is, because you can watch this at any time you want. That's the cool nature of podcasting.
It's 1:45.
It's 2 p.m., girl.
Yeah,
Let's go ahead
it's
and round up.
Yeah. I also left early last night, so I went to bed by like 12:30. I slept. I did the math 4 times longer than Grant, 3 times longer than Grant did, objectively, and I'm still exhausted.
You are, and I think this is so important to the field of science, like experimenting with the kind of long sleeps we're going to need to travel the universe.
Thank you.
You are upstairs in a cryogenics chamber of just locked inness.
Cryogenic.
Sure, whatever. I mean, I'm not going to trust it. I don't download new apps on my phone. I'm going to probably stay right here on this earth and just
I don't want to
remark at the
leave
sun.
either, is the thing. I have no desire.
I could see someone being like, hey, have you thought about sleeping for 80 years? And you were like, yeah, I have. And then you kind of like stumble into it. You
yeah,
know?
and then I have to like fake a terminal illness or something so that they won't send me like the draft.
I would still hope you got the chamber, just not the space travel.
Yeah, thank you. Like they had to like like curate it to me, and then they're like, well, we can't throw it away.
Exactly.
So just like go
It's
ahead.
like when the
Yeah.
waiter comes to your table and is like, so here's your basket of fries. And
Yeah.
everyone's like, we didn't order a basket of fries.
Yeah.
And they're like, okay. But now you're like, well, what are you going to do with that basket of fries?
put it
You
down.
can put it here.
Leave it. That's okay.
Part of me, and like, I wish them, I mean, like, we're all just trying to make it through this world.
Yeah.
Part of me is like, did you intentionally put in an order knowing that we didn't order it, and then now you have your own basket of fries back there? That's totally fine. We just also want our own basket of fries.
Yeah, that's fine. I won't tell anyone.
Right, exactly. We're in on this together. Let's deal.
Yeah. So before I figure out cryogenic sleep, I do need to figure out how to make my dogs live forever. That is my biggest issue.
Again, I am reminded of that study I saw like 2 years ago. It was like, oh, hey, we have figured out how to fix kidney disease in cats, and they might be able to live till age 30 now.
Sometimes I forget how long horses live.
Oh, there's going to be horse content in this episode too, by the way. That's us putting it
Am I
together.
worried? Should I be worried?
I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah, they shouldn't not be worried about the horses.
Oh, God.
It's not primarily about horses, I want you to know.
Did not make me feel better.
It's mainly about, I'll tell you later. It's mainly about elves.
Speaking of elves.
No, Danny's great. He's just a little pocket man. Say your words now.
I was like asking, I used to have a really good understanding of like how long horses lived and like what, like, you know, if someone tells you that like their big dog is like 5, you know that they're like mid-aged, you
Right.
know, if not on the older side, depending on the size of the dog. I forgot, like, I don't have that like immediate gut response of like understanding how old a horse is when they tell me the age. I asked, there was a horse that I rode on my most recent horseback riding lesson, whose name, by the way, Joe Ford.
Like
Joe
a voter in Ohio.
Ford. Because he used to be a horse for like a pickup competition. So pickup, Ford.
Right, no.
Ford pickup.
What does it look, what do you mean a horse was in a pickup competition?
I don't want to have to explain it because I'm not sure that I can
Is
right
there a
now.
horse in a hospital situation
No.
on?
It's more like a Western reining type competition.
okay.
Yeah, I don't know.
See, the only thing I'm even kind of tangentially in the ballpark with, and I do love to use this sometimes. I know, especially if you're on your YouTube and you're looking at me, I don't give this vibe naturally, but I actually went to quite a few tractor pulls as a kid.
I do
and
love a tractor pull.
Honestly, I remember it being insanely loud and unenjoyable at the time.
What is your version of a tractor pull? I think I may be
Isn't
thinking
there
of a wrong
only one version of a tractor pull? It's a tractor that you then chain to a huge weight to see how much weight it can pull.
Oh, I have done the opposite, where it's instead of a tractor,
What?
it's a horse pulling increasing amounts of weight.
Is that what a truck competition
No,
is
no,
for
no,
horses?
no.
I'm still lost. Okay.
No, this is
Tractor pulls are, you have a tractor and then it pulls a heavy weight and you get to see
Mm-hmm.
like whose tractor can pull the most weight. Those are insanely loud. And also always in like, it felt like the dead of night with like searchlights on.
Oh.
And there's like this like dirt arena in my parents are from a small town, if that isn't clear at this point. And it's like, I'm like related to everyone, but I'm also lost and I don't really love the noise, you know?
Yeah,
But
it's
fine.
usually, when I've seen it, it's been draft horses pulling, and then they
See, that
like,
sounds like eleganza.
sure. Yeah.
My uncle, at least when he was a kid, and then my grandfather on my mom's side, were occasional tractor pull winners.
That's so fun.
Yeah, I come from a family of champions.
Oh, also in things that happened to me last night, I'm
ahead.
still not convinced that I wasn't pranked, and if you're thinking it was the snake incident, you're wrong. Everyone was just out to get me last night. I don't know why.
Oh, why am I persecuted like this?
Is it because I come off as straight?
Oh, is that what we're talking about?
No.
Okay.
That was a whole other thing. But there was a guy there who I had talked to a couple times that night. He seemed very nice, obviously, but I was listening to a conversation, I think with you and some other people.
Yeah.
And not engaging. And if you know me, you know that sometimes I don't like to drink alcohol. I like some other recreational things.
Right.
And so take that into understanding, and so I'm just quietly
We
listening.
basically tied Maya down at this point,
Yeah,
just to
yeah.
keep her from floating away.
Yeah, exactly. I'm just listening. I'm not super social. I'm just vibing. This guy walks up to me. I see him walk up to me, and it's like eyes from the kitchen walks up to me, so I know he's coming. And I'm like, oh God, like what? He's coming in hot.
Also,
like, what
it's
the
a
hell?
very LGBT party.
Oh, yeah.
So it's not like a flirting pass.
No,
That
not
is
at all. That is not the vibe I got at all.
This man's pants are sparkly silver.
Yes, yeah, and
also
his
kind of
shirt
like a
was
great black
also.
turtleneck.
Oh yeah, he had a great outfit.
Yeah,
he came up to me and started speaking Spanish fluently
Mm-hmm.
and looking at me as if he expected me to respond, and I had to be like, no, I don't speak Spanish. And then I was like, does he only speak Spanish? Like, is this on me? And then I was like, no, I've talked to him before in the same evening, and he didn't even have an accent when he spoke English. Like, did I miss an accent? Can he only really, and he doesn't really speak that much Spanish, and someone maybe told him that I speak Spanish and that I can help him with this? And like, what's happening?
And then he switches to Italian.
Yeah, and then I had to keep going, and then he switches to Italian, and I was like, this seems like a different language that I still don't understand. Am I being pranked? Like, where are the cameras right now? And I was so scared that he was like actually like needed my help and could not figure out how to communicate with me. And then Grant turns around and starts speaking Spanish back, and I was like, that's it. Like, I don't know where the hell I am, but I am so uncomfortable right now.
Thank you for giving me a jumping in point.
Yes,
So
yeah.
that conversation starts right away, and I do think so highly of you that when I hear that conversation kick off, my first thought is like, I always forget Maya speaks Spanish.
I does not speak Spanish.
I was like, oh, that's right. I think like another talent of hers that she has. And then I hear you being like, I don't know what you just say. And then I'm like, okay, so I was right. And she doesn't. Okay, well, let's go ahead and tune in for a second. And then I realized that like, I think it's a prank. She's being like bullied a little bit.
I was like,
and
who
so
told
then
you
I
to
was
target
like,
me?
uh-oh, is this a situation a white man can fix? And so then I turn around, and yeah, a couple sayings in Spanish, we talk, and then he says one more thing, and then I deliver a devastating retort in English, and then it's all done, and I'm just like, a lot of fun at parties.
I was just like, thank you. It was just so confusing, because if it was someone that I knew better, I literally met this man that night and exchanged maybe a total of 5 like sentences with him, like exclusively, and then I was like, what's happening? You can't do this to me. I'm so anxious.
So it was a good time. I think it was a really good time. I think we all had a good time
Stink
together.
came at me. I just wanted tacos for so long. I was so tired.
And the tough thing is, because I was wearing a shirt, you'll understand. I was wearing a shirt I could not stain, and thus I could not eat any tacos.
Oh, is that
and
why?
it's one of my favorite taco places.
I know. I remember.
It's a shirt I'm bringing to Napa for my family vacation, and so I was like, I can't splatter
do
anything
this.
on this.
No, that's fair.
And here's the thing. The opportunity to learn how to eat properly passed me by when I was a child. I've just always been more enthusiastic than skilled.
I just live in where we live in Colorado. It's never been a necessity for me to learn how to eat properly.
I just kind of get so excited that it kind of ends up everywhere a little bit. Yeah. And instead of fixing that, I have just stopped wearing white to dinner parties.
That's fair.
And last night,
idea.
not eating tacos. But we might be circling back to that place later on.
It was good. I had a
I'm
great cheese
so
quesadilla.
hungry. Yeah.
I had a great cheese quesadilla with some sour cream and some guac and some salsa.
Post-show.
Sure.
You're so tired. The idea of being awake after the show for you feels like a real push right now.
The idea of being awake after we finish recording feels like a real push for me. Also, my Uber driver back to my home last night. First of all, I felt so bad. We went to get tacos, right?
Right.
And then Grant and Tyler went to go investigate a gay club right next door.
And I use the word club, but a little gay establishment next door.
I didn't go in. I didn't see the vibes.
Little hole in the wall.
Yeah, it was
fun,
cute. But then I was gonna just like say goodbye to everyone else and then wait for my Uber. And Lydia, being the just like sweetest human being ever, was like, no, I'll wait for you. And I was like, okay. Like, luckily in Denver, when you order an Uber, look, like most of the time it comes in like 3 seconds flat.
Especially downtown.
Yeah, it's terrifying. Like the app will say 5 minutes. Never believe it.
All cars
because-
on the road in Denver are actually Ubers.
Yeah, because it'll show up and then you'll get charged a fee for making it wait for too long or some shit. And so I was like, okay, that's fine. So the first Uber like gets to the street it needs to turn down to pick me up, cancels on me.
Oh.
Yeah, then it assigns me another driver. The driver's like 5 minutes away. I was like, okay, fine, whatever. And then they get to the same spot, cancel on me. And then I order another Uber, and that Uber is like 12 minutes away and also not moving towards me. And I was like, I'm done with this.
This taco place is on a pretty poppin' part of downtown,
yeah, and so
too.
I just like canceled the Uber and got a Lyft, but the whole endeavor took me like 15 minutes. And then within that time, I was standing with Lydia, Jacob, and Sophie outside of where you and Tyler were, and you could just tell Jacob wanted to go into that establishment so bad. He was like on the sidewalk, like dancing to what was going on inside, and Lydia was like, "Are we driving home?" And Jacob was like, "Yeah, I'll drive home." And she was like, "Well, if you go in there, are you gonna have a drink?" And he was like probably one. And she was like, "Okay, so you probably shouldn't go in then." And he was like, "Yeah." And she was like, "Do you want to go in?" And he was like, "I mean, yeah." And then she tried so hard. It was because I was waiting for this Uber for so freaking long. Lydia went from, "We should head back to our home now," to, "Well, you can go in and then we'll meet you at the next place," to, "Let's all go in." And I was like, I'm so sorry that my wait here has really like shattered your plans for
It got
yourself.
them out to be longer, which I loved.
It did. Yeah. Anyway, I finally got into this Uber. It was a Tesla, which always is just funny because,
Classic.
especially living in Denver, I get enough Ubers that are Teslas. So like, and I've had friends that have Teslas, so I know how to open the door.
Right.
I don't think this man thought I knew how to open
Well,
the
you're
door.
a woman.
Here's the thing. I ordered two
That point
Ubers.
was so strong.
Here's the thing. I ordered 2 Ubers that night. One to get to Danny's. The second one to get home. The first one, I'm not sure if I just made him wait for just too long and he like got bored, but he came out of the car and opened the door for me, which just like made me feel weird. I was like, "Are you stealing me into the night?" Like,
Just wants a tip.
but then I get into his car, his truck, and he's like, "What, do you want any music?" And I was like, "Yeah, that's fine." He was very kind.
Sure.
Like, we had to go a different route, and he like informed me that the route had changed so I didn't like panic or whatever. And he was a very good driver. And I was like, "I shouldn't have even been like afraid of you. You're so kind." But I could tell as soon as I said like, "Yeah, music is fine, but like you put on whatever you want, like I don't care." And he was like, "Really?" And I was like, "Yeah, put on whatever you want." He was like, "Well, what do you normally listen to?"
This answer's about to be.
And I was like, "Well, I'll really listen to anything. Like, you could put on like rap or like pop or country or whatever. I'm fine." And he was like, "Okay, yeah, you should probably pick something." And I saw his phone right before he handed it to me to like pick a playlist from YouTube Music. Ska. He was ready to turn on
also,
ska.
yikes, but
Yeah.
love that.
I know. I was like, I mean, I would have vibed with you. I don't know that I would have enjoyed it, but I would have been here with you.
That is your walking in a park, looking at the
Yeah.
sky, being like, "Look at us all doing this together."
Yeah.
Like, you have those moments too. They're just not like,
they're just
Hallmark movie moments like I have.
Yeah. On the ride back, the driver got out of the car, I think because he was convinced I wouldn't know how to open the door to his
Good.
Tesla. So he like
Just a little
closed
button.
the door. He also got out when I got out, and I was like, "This wasn't necessary. You can stay where you are." But then he told me about how he's like he's a widower, he has 2 kids. He seemed very nice, but then
Loves his kids and never stops.
yeah, but then he told me that he owns a company on the East Coast, and he like had to go back there to like fill in for a director. I was like, "That's all fine and good, and I'd believe that if you weren't my Lyft driver right now. Why are you doing this at midnight on a Friday if you own a company?" I'm confused.
And to be clear, like, it's no slam against driving for Lyft
No.
or owning a company, but I have the exact number of jobs I have to have, which is 1.
Also,
and I have no intention of having more jobs.
He also was like, "I promised my kids that I'd hop on a FaceTime call with them after I drop you off to like say goodnight and read them a bedtime story." I was like, "It's midnight." He was like, he would told me that they like got to stay up late and like watch a movie, which was like a treat for them. But I was like, "Why are you like, you clearly want to be with your kids,
Right.
And if you own a company, why are you not with your children?"
This isn't at all the story I was going to
Yeah.
share, but it reminded me of it, so we're going to say it. Do you remember our Lyft ride in London to the airport
Yes.
that morning with our
Yes.
driver?
Yes.
And it started off just like,
Yeah.
It started off just like really funny, like, "Oh, our Uber driver in London knows where Cleveland, Ohio is." Like, that's funny.
Yeah.
And by the time we got out of the Lyft, and you've all been there, you get it, especially you city girls, you're like, "Well, good luck with that custody
Yeah,
battle."
yeah.
Like, having met you, I actually really do think like it's all going to work out. And what's so funny about all of that is it was so ungodly early in the morning.
It was like 4 a.m.
and we're invested in this man's life.
I was so so into it.
that when he ran through a puddle with the windows open, I got fully hit in the face with water. And you and him, I don't think, noticed right away. We're in the backseat, and I have to tap your arm, and I'm like... as we just speed to London. But Europe doesn't believe in air conditioning, so it was the coldest I was that entire trip.
Yeah, it's true.
Okay, last thing I want to share then, and I don't think you heard this, and then we can get into the story. But I don't. Okay, so you're outside waiting for this Uber Lyft situation to come up. Tyler and I walk into this bar, and it is like classic hole in the wall vibes. Like, is she dirty? No. Is she clean? No. You know, I don't feel unsafe or anything. It's not like a threatening bar. You're just like, wow, okay, yeah, sure.
Yeah, why not?
Absolutely. And so we get a drink. And the bartender is looking at Tyler, and he's like, "You look like this blah 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 guy." And like Tyler like Googles it, and as the guy walked away, Tyler goes, "Do I really look like this?" And I'm like, "No, babes, I think he was hitting on you." And then we're like, "Oh, there's some like billiards," so we walk back to that area, and then we're like, "Oh, there's a patio," and we walk back to that area, and then on the patio we're like, wait, what's this giant stage sunken down? It passed this deck situation. Wait, is there nothing blocking it? And so then by that point, Jacob had arrived, but just Jacob at that point. And people will come up to me after meeting Jacob, and they're like, "Did you know Jacob's actually super funny?"
Yes.
Yes,
We
I've been
all
friends with
know.
him for a decade and a half, just because he's not as loud as the rest of us.
I trust him implicitly with comedic timing.
Yeah, he is absolutely the funniest one among us.
Oh, he's so
and
funny.
he says so little.
Yeah.
But anyways, he shows up. I'm like, Jacob and Tyler like record me, and I'm like, I'm gonna go until there's a sign that says don't go. And so I like get down to that platform, and then I get around to the back, and then I'm like, there's like steps, nary a sign the entire time. And I'm like, take a photo of me, and I'm like posing like Marilyn Monroe or whatever.
Oh my God.
And I get back and leave it to Tyler and a straight man to take the worst photos and videos of me ever. I look like a ghost that haunts that place, essentially.
I did train Tyler to take good photos. It did take a while, and he does need a professional camera to really get
His
into
iPhone
the
7
character.
didn't really capture me and my essence in the way I had hoped.
Yeah.
Anyways, do you want to get into today's story?
If we have to.
Amazing. Are you going to be able to do it?
Be fine.
Do you need to use the restroom or get a baby bell? I mean, we can pause whenever, but I just want you to, we're going to check it.
I will most likely need a bathroom break at some point.
Amazing. Okay.
And a cheese break.
So I did say earlier that this conversation, this episode that we're about to talk about, is about elves.
Friend and foes and horses somehow.
And elves. We're going to talk about the labor dispute between Santa and his workshop. No, I'm kidding.
Okay.
I want to ask...
I'm in it with you. I want you to know.
And you know I'm on the side of the worker.
Yes.
I'm instead going to talk about a different topic entirely for a second, okay?
Oh, okay.
What are your thoughts on civil protest and unrest?
Yes.
Yep, okay. So, like in the news recently, right, you've seen people, like, shutting down streets, like, in protest of various causes.
Yeah.
Most recently, it's been conflict in Israel, Gaza, but it's also been...
Like Palestine. Ukraine. And
Yes, and there was also before that, there was like the George Floyd and the Black Lives Matter movement, and there is like a lot of tradition around all of that stuff. Do you think that's an appropriate way for people to express their frustration?
It depends on how it ends, I think.
Yeah.
I think most of the time it ends up being escalated due to outside forces trying to make the situation go a certain way. But I think for the most part, most people are able to peacefully protest.
I want to point out, just for the record and because of our conversation, I asked you a broad question, and I'm sure there's examples for whatever point you want to prove 100%. That fall under this. But like for the most part, you know, like...
Sometimes a little arson didn't hurt anybody.
Listen,
you know?
Last night when we were walking, do you remember what I said?
We should not share that on this platform.
I won't say it, that maybe a Patreon story.
Grant saw a building that he thought would look really great in flames.
Not like full of people, like empty.
He was
and
like,
it's
wouldn't
old.
that look beautiful as it's burning down?
Listen, part of it has one of those windows where like the walls bumped out and then the windows are like kind of on either side of it. So it'd be like shooting flames sideways a little bit. sometimes you like see. Okay, it's the same kind of thing about like. I'm glad I wasn't on the Titanic, but I bet that was a fascinating experience to be on a boat that's sinking.
Remember when I was just trying to defend Casey? This is what you're doing right now.
I also wish I had a better understanding of like the chaotic good, chaotic neutral, chaotic bad, like
Chaotic,
you know
evil.
that. I wish I had a better understanding of that like template.
Yeah.
It really would have been helpful for today's episode, but
Would you like me to walk through it with you?
maybe just the highlights. What's the funniest one?
So on the x-axis, it's chaotic, neutral, evil, and on the
Okay.
y-axis, it's
Chaotic, neutral, evil.
chaotic, neutral, lawful.
Okay.
And then on the y-axis, it's evil, neutral, good. And so you have true neutral, which is like neutral, and then you have neutral good and neutral evil. And then on the right side of the axis, you have lawful good, lawful neutral, lawful evil. And then on the other side, you have chaotic good, chaotic neutral, chaotic evil. So I think the funniest ones are chaotic good,
Yes.
which can be like anonymous.
Right.
Right. And then
Wipe away our student loans.
Yeah.
Nona emailed me again, and I was like, "Oh my god, like get over it. Like
Get
we're over
over
it.
it.
You
It's
know,
fine."
I'm never
And-
gonna pay you back."
And then the other funny one is lawful evil, like the Pinkertons.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Yeah.
I just want you to keep that in mind.
Okay.
I think this will be a really fun XY axis for us to explore at the end of today's
Excellent.
episode. Okay.
Did you bring the whiteboard?
No, but I can write on the mirror.
If you write on that mirror, I'll kill you.
I'm in summer now. It's actually so messed up for you to ask me to like write on a whiteboard.
I'll
Ask
write
me
on a
again in
whiteboard.
August, okay?
Okay.
All right, so I am going to introduce you to a man by the name of Daniel McGowan.
Hi, Daniel.
Does that name sound familiar
No.
to you at all? I love it. I love
I just love that there's always a moment in both of our episodes where we're like, does this sound familiar?
Hey, for the next 2 hours, do you already know this?
Because like, I
And
don't want
we're-
to tell you again if you
Right.
already...
And we're all like, no, very much no.
No.
And we're like, sweet, dodged a bullet. But then we picked the most obscure topics,
yeah.
like an evil possessed spirit mongoose named Jeff
I have
on the
no
Isle
qualms.
of Man. Nice use of the word qualms. I
you.
recently took an English content test to be able to teach English classes.
Mm-hmm.
Learned a lot in 48 hours. Let me tell you that much.
I also learned a lot, not by choice.
Okay, so Daniel McGowan, I'm gonna kind of like slow roll this information to you.
Okay.
Okay, so Daniel McGowan at one point was living with his sister, and his sister's giving this interview,
Okay.
and she goes, "Here is how like intense Daniel was about this kind of stuff. One day I came home when he was living with me, and he had taken all of the labels off of the cans, and I said, Daniel, why would you do that?" And
Yeah.
he goes, "In order to recycle the cans, you have to take the labels off." It's like in the 90s where they printed them with like arsenic or whatever.
Yeah.
And he was like, "In order to recycle them, you have to take the labels off the cans." And his sister had to be like, "Yeah, that's cool. I can vibe with that." They were all full of food though.
And no, we have no idea what is what.
And so she was like, "Which one of these is peas?" And he was like, "Oh, I actually hadn't thought about that." And so... here are a couple quotes from Daniel.
Okay.
I kind of just love them, okay? "It's a hideous thing to be called a terrorist.
What?
No one was in those facilities. No one died. No one was hurt." Another quote. "I think people think it's a bunch of pissed off young people walking around with gas cans lighting things on fire, and that pisses them off."
What?
To his attorney, "Don't bring up cooperation as a tactic. Don't bring it up. It's not an option. It's not in our back pocket. I am not going to cooperate with law enforcement."
I am so confused. I thought I was getting slow rolled information. I have no idea where I am right now. If you're confused, I have not had any drinks, so I know that this is just confusing.
Another quote from Daniel. "I mean, I compost. I had never used a dishwasher until I moved in with my sister." Huge Tyler vibes.
Yeah,
who keeps hand washing everything at my house. Not because they're dirty, but because he doesn't have a dishwasher himself.
Oh my god.
And then a quote from Daniel McGowan's sister. Also, Daniel McGowan, his last name starts with an M, but I just put his initials as DG throughout the entire thing.
Well, you don't know, though. That's very
Gowan.
confusing.
Oh, I know it is.
Because that's my company's acronym.
Oh, that's so funny. Anyways, here's a quote from his sister. I'd be lying if I called myself an environmentalist. I mean, I recycle. Maybe not everything.
Wait, that's from his sister?
Yes.
Okay.
And so we have brother-sister dynamic, really funny, really interesting.
I wish Tyler had a sister.
He has a brother, but
I know,
think
but
a
his
sister
brother's
would be
too
really
similar to
interested.
him in a lot of ways, yeah.
I think of like a mean older sister would be so interesting to me for Tyler.
It would really change the whole dynamic.
I don't know if he would still know how to use a dishwasher, but like I do think it'd be funny and interesting.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think he would get teased the right amount, though, you know?
Anyways, Daniel McGowan, or the group he was involved in the late 90s, committed the largest act of eco-terrorism in the history of the United States. And when they did, the FBI didn't know anything about the organization.
This feels like the Unabomber.
It actually is insanely similar to the
cool.
Unabomber. Today, we're going to talk about Daniel McGowan and his collective of elves, also known as the Earth Liberation Front, the ELF. I'm not even joking. They call themselves elves. I'm adding the V, but they call themselves elves.
Oh.
And we're going to talk about eco-terrorism.
I love it.
And the morally gray area it poses. I just want to remind everyone real quick, the title of this episode is Friend or Foe?
The theme.
I have been trying, right, the theme, thank you. And I have been trying to figure out when to insert this, and now feels like a good time. About 10 months ago, at the start of this beautiful journey together, when we were just in the initial stages of being a singing podcast.
Oh, sure.
I sing a song from Caleb Hebron in response to the Supreme Court ruling around abortion access, but it feels really pertinent in this episode.
Okay.
Maybe it's time for political violence against my enemies. It agrees with me politically, or it gets the violence.
I think that was actually the Unabomber episode.
So let's go ahead and buckle up into this. We're running it back, folks.
Holy shit.
Oh, I'm actually really thrilled.
I'm excited.
I had a very fun time. This was my fun little like social break from all of the grad school work I had to be doing. It's actually so insane. Like, I do think I'm a pretty good student. Haven't gotten a single grade back to support that claim. But I'm like, I do think I'm a pretty solid student, but it's been a while since I've been a student. And so I don't feel like I'm like the rhythm and groove yet. And every assignment, I'm like, okay, what exactly do they want me to do? And I'm like, I need to start cutting some of these corners. And so
I think once you get your first grade back, you'll be better about them.
100%.
Yeah.
Either I'll get an A or they'll get an email. It agrees with me academically, or it gets the email.
I'm almost worried that you will get an A, and you'll think that... No, hear me out. I'm worried that you'll get an A, like an A+, like 100% or whatever, and then you'll think that the effort you're putting in right now is the effort needed to get that grade, and you won't actually internalize the actual effort that you need to be putting in.
No, I love that.
Yeah.
As soon as I know what this high water mark is, we're coming down a little bit. We're draining that pond a little bit. Okay?
Until you end up getting like an A-.
91.5.
Yeah.
Exactly. Okay, so let's start off talking a little bit about Daniel McGowan, his early life, how he ultimately gets mixed up in a good, bad, neutral, lawful crowd. Just kind of what his backstory is.
Okay,
so, oh, no, I don't want to edit. And then there I am. Okay, so Daniel McGowan grew up in Queens, in New York City. He went to a private school. He was just your, like, average kid. He went off to college. Do I write what college he went to? No, he goes off to college. He gets a degree in business education, quote, because that just felt very practical.
Yeah.
And after he graduates from college with a business degree, he just goes to a public relations firm. He is he is just your average middle-of-the-road guy, right?
Yeah.
Super unremarkable in the annals of history up to this point.
Yeah.
And also a city kid, had lived in the city his entire life. Well, then... his entire life starts to change when he goes to a bar called the Wetlands. And this is what's so funny to me, because this is so queer, but the Wetlands isn't queer. It's something else entirely. But I was a normal pencil pusher, and then I went to a bar, and now I'm like a radical queer person, right? It happened to me. It can happen to you.
Yeah, it'll happen to everybody. Yeah.
That is the corruption Republicans are concerned about. They're afraid if they go to a gay bar, they will have an amazing time.
Also realize that they're people.
It's just so crazy to think there's whole people out there not living their fully authentic self uninhibited by social norms. Mm-hmm. Anyways, Daniel McGowan was one of those guys. He was going to this bar called the Wetlands, and from the documentary that I watched called If a Tree Falls, a lady in a park was like, hey, do you want to sign this proposition to get it on the ballot? And he was like, yeah, sure, I guess, whatever. I'm just your average guy who works at a PR firm. And he's signing it, and she's talking to him about it, and she goes, actually, we're having a meeting later on this week at this place called the Wetlands. If you're curious, you should swing by. It's important to know this is late 80s, maybe 1990, okay? So there's no internet, there's nothing that. There's nothing to do. So when someone's like, hey, come to this place called the Wetlands, you go,
I would. Maybe.
Me last night when I was what if we investigated this haunted bar?
Yeah.
Why don't we just go? What are we gonna do? What are we gonna do? Arrive at our destination on time? No, not in June.
Never. Never once. Not a single time have we arrived anywhere on time when Grant has had anything to say about it.
In this life, it's about the journey. Okay. That's what the cloud said to me today.
Okay.
Listen, I am now processing that experience out loud with you.
Yeah.
I'm dial it back, Grant. Dial it back. Okay. So, he goes to the Wetlands, and the Wetlands is... Do you remember the Tom Shoe Company? You'd buy a pair of shoes. So the Wetlands is that business model, but as a bar. So it's a bar, and you can get drinks and stuff there, and there's a nightlife, and then all of the excess profits after operational costs goes to fund environmentalist groups.
Okay.
That's why it's called the Wetlands. And then it also, because it's New York in the 90s, there's readings, and there's writing workshops, and there's meetings, and there's documentaries. It's very cool. Honestly, I'm would go to these kind of bars now, you know? It's but the concept of third spaces, that's all I really want.
It's also funny to me that in America we have bars that do this, and in every other part of the country it's coffee shops or bookstores, and we're no, you gotta combine alcohol.
I need to be able to see a giant grain elevator behind you that's full of a terrible IPA.
What the fuck?
It's actually so funny. When I first moved to Denver, it was in the grips of an IPA fever, and I was I'm just starting to drink beer, but this is awful. It tastes
so bad.
Gross nickels.
Yeah.
So I don't know what they were serving at the Wetlands, but what they were serving is some truth. And they would have these movie nights that were horrific. Oh. They showed a couple of clips of some of these movies in the documentary. Content warning, animal abuse about to happen in 2 seconds.
Oh God. Oh,
plus 15 right now. Videos of whales being hunted and speared and then dragged on, and forests on fire, and mountaintop strip mining and things like that. Just death, abuse. It is horrific to watch now.
I hate it.
And that is with us as an internet culture. Description's done if you're still nervous. That is us with an internet culture now.
Understanding,
Right, but also sometimes you'll just be on Instagram, and then you'll see the most horrifying thing imaginable, and oftentimes that raises awareness, and I think also it's desensitized us a little bit to stuff.
100%. If CNN could really stop showing videos in general, someone needs to take away their right to do that.
Again, I think you should stop watching CNN. I don't think it's good for your health.
No, probably not. But I like to be informed.
I think you should watch Fox News.
I would rather die, actually. I would rather burn my own eyes out.
My mom worked from home when we were kids, and so she would always watch soap operas, and Fox News feels so past the point of parody now that it feels like a soap opera.
Yeah.
It's Days of Our Lives are not slanding.
Yeah. Yeah.
So anyways, he's at this bar called the Wetlands. He's watching these videos happen, and it is completely radicalizing him. And
I love that.
Takes over his life. Honestly, same.
Yeah.
If you haven't already been able to tell, let me say it out loud. I'm watching this documentary on eco-terrorism, and I'm oh God, that's bringing up a lot of good points, though. Oh God, that's bringing up a lot of good points, right? And so...
Maybe it's time for political violence. Singing podcast.
I should have asked that you had that. You had the tone. I didn't harmonize with you at all. I'm sorry.
Unbelievable.
So
I'm up here, not down here.
you can't possibly think that sounds like the same as me. I can still understand you even when you're singing.
No, you can't.
It's a scene from Modern Family. Okay, so he lets it take over his life. And so he joins a bunch of different protest groups that, of course, meet at the wetlands, right? There's pictures of him protesting fur coats outside of Macy's, which is how you know it's the 90s, because, who is still selling fur coats anymore, you know?
Truly.
And they say that he is, like, the model of, like, a civil protester at the time.
Okay.
He writes letters to public officials.
Yeah.
He attends like sit-ins and lessons and talks to his publicly elected officials. He does all of like those traditional channels of like constituency expression that we talk to kids about all the time.
That you're supposed to do.
Correct.
Yeah.
And you know,
sometimes that doesn't work.
Right. For him, I think at this point, like it kind of itches this, like scratches the itch a little bit, but doesn't do like enough. But I don't think, from the vibes I get, Daniel McGowan realizes that he's feeling partially frustrated.
Yeah.
And then one of the environmental groups he's in does a little road trip. Remember, they're in New York City.
Yeah.
Okay, so they road trip to Crandon, Wisconsin, which is hosting this like small little conference of all these environmental groups.
Yeah.
And here's what actually kind of shocked me first. This is the first time Daniel McGowan is in nature.
Ever?
He grew up in New York. His family wasn't, from the looks of it, super wealthy. Like, just lived in
like
New York.
in the city.
Yeah,
Oh my God.
Like, is a city person. And so, like, he talks about this experience, and it's like, he's 22 when he goes to this conference.
Yeah.
And it's like, he went to summer camp. He was like, no, like, you don't get it. Like, we were, like, swimming in lakes. We were, like...
doing things that normal kids
swinging
do.
in trees. We were camping every night. And I'm like, you're protesting, like, fur coats and you've never seen a deer? Like, wow.
How?
Really putting the cart in front of the horse. Because, of course, it'd be unethical to use the horse.
Jesus.
Thank you. I was actually really proud of that.
Okay.
And then the final day of the conference... I think one of the reasons why Crandon, Wisconsin was selected is it's a small town, but in that town is the headquarters of a local mining company. And so last day, they go out and like protest in front of it or whatever. And at 22 in Crandon, Wisconsin, Daniel McGowan gets arrested for the first time. Oh. Is that everything? And I just need you to look at his mugshot from that arrest.
He looks so happy!
I mean, I think it's still because, like, this is how every kid looks. It's floating here now.
Yeah.
This is how every kid looks after summer camp.
Yeah.
Right? They're like, oh, you look unwashed, but you do look, like, in a soul way
He
happy.
looks just like the most generic white man you've ever seen, but he's smiling. He's cheesing.
100%. You know he has a carabiner on him.
Oh, yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Like, if he was like, I would recommend the sour, you're getting the sour beer.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
He also... no regrets.
Yeah, he doesn't.
No
he's not
regrets.
smiling in a way that makes you think like he knows what he did, and he's like, "See, you've learned your lesson." He's smiling like, "I just had a great fucking time."
He also looks like a man who has been fully liberated from his PR job.
Yes. He does not care anymore.
Not sure if he's just found his passion or if he doesn't have to work for corporate America. Someone quit and then take a picture. Let us know.
Let us know if it looks like,
yeah. I'm actually starting to do a grad school program. I don't know if I've mentioned it. I've been pretty tight-lipped about it.
No, he's never once mentioned
That'd be called a quantitative study. Please just pass me. Okay. So that moment jumpstarts things for him.
Okay.
And he's now like going on these trips with these groups. He's like protesting. He's like meeting other environmentalists and environmental groups. And he develops a nickname. And do you want to guess what his nickname is?
Smiley?
No.
I have no idea.
They nickname him the Disgruntled One.
That guy?
Yes! No, but hear me out. It's kind of like his eyes were opened for the first time. And now he's like, oh, everything's broken. Oh, everything's wrong. And it's like nothing could be perfect, right?
Yeah.
Like they could shut down a lumber operation.
And it's still not enough.
And he'd be pissed at the gas they had to use to do that kind of stuff, you know?
God.
Like, just seems mad at the world, but like
Yeah.
in a cool, edgy way,
Yeah.
not in a boring indie pop band edgy way, you know? Like, it's not that his parents didn't understand him, it's that corporations were harvesting Earth's precious resources to turn an instant profit without thinking of future generations.
God forbid.
A whole different style of disgruntledness.
Yeah.
I think our generation now just calls that existentialism or
Yeah.
Mondays.
I don't know. We're all so desensitized to capitalism at this point.
Garfield has a new movie out, and it's like,
Oh,
looks
yeah.
like someone is a case of the Mondays, and the Mondays is like a never-ending hamster wheel that crushes people below it for the profits of like a handful of others. Mondays.
God forbid.
I'm a teacher on break now. I'm just kind of a bit more like loosey-goosey. I'm like easy breezy.
He's wearing a
cover
Hawaiian
girl.
shirt.
I am. It transcends all occasions. I can kind of go anywhere, and people would be like, no, but for reals. And we're going to get back to Daniel McGowan in a second. If I were to show up to a wedding dressed the way I am,
Yeah.
everyone's going to be like, this guy's going to be fun. Let's make sure he gets a toast. If I were to show up to a funeral wearing this, they'd be like, this guy understood the deceased and like is really here to celebrate his life. It works for all occasions.
Do we add Hawaiian shirts to our merch line? You just sold them.
And if you call in the next 15 minutes, not only will you get the Hawaiian shirt, but on the back, custom embroidered, the disgruntled one. It's ironic, perfect for Pride, and just in time. One size fits all. No, but for reals, like, isn't it great?
Yeah.
Okay, so Daniel McGowan.
It's so early.
This is going to be me for the next 2.5 months.
I know.
Last summer, we were still, like, at the cusp of this, like, friendship or whatever, and now it's just like, here I am, here I am. Dolly Parton. So in 1995, Daniel McGowan is living in New York still, but on the other side of the country in Oregon, just outside of Eugene, Oregon, in kind of like the western Oregon area, the National Forest Service opens up a forest in Oregon to logging called Warner Creek.
Me.
So, oh my God, I had not made that connection at all. Yes.
That's my creek.
So they're about to cut your timber, Kesha.
No!
Real ones get it. It is like a gorgeous forest. It is the
I'm gonna kill
Goose.
him. Is it Goose again?
No, it's a different man.
Oh.
It is like what Disney Pixar like runs towards when it's trying to animate what a forest looks like. It's like mountains, but not huge mountains, and so it's like
Yeah,
mountains and
rolling
valleys,
hills
and it's
yeah.
just everything's wooded, and it's these ancient trees. A lot of these trees sprouted like in the 1500s, so they are 500-year-old trees, and the National Forest Service, because it had been public land, because it's owned
Right.
by the national government, leases it out to mining and logging, and the growing but quiet environmentalist movement,
You're
which is
right.
based in the Pacific Northwest,
Right, yeah.
is like, well, over our dead
bodies.
Let me pick up where I wrote so I get this right. And these activists want to protect this like perfect forest and stand their ground. They go up to Warner Creek. There's basically one access road in and out of this forest.
Okay.
And they literally put their bodies on the road.
Nice.
And there's a moment too, and I get goosebumps now thinking about it,
Yeah.
right? Like these timber companies have these like bulldozers that are like charging these people, and they're leaning forward towards the bulldozer. Like, do it, coward. Run me over.
Is this the first time we see a protest like this?
It's becoming a movement in that
Okay.
way. I don't want to be like that's the first time because there's
Yeah.
like a lot of history to
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
environmentalism.
Yeah.
But this specific movement like is
the big one.
Right. And I think
A big
maybe
one.
why this movement is like so noticeable is because this movement has cameras. They have video
Okay, yeah.
cameras
Fair.
and there is clearly a certain portion of them who are there intentionally to preserve a visual record of what is
what
going on.
happened, that someone fought it.
Right, exactly. So you have a lot of footage actually from these kind of moments generated by these people to show them how serious they were, what they were doing when they were ultimately like assaulted or arrested
Right,
or ran
yeah.
over or whatever. Like there is this record of them standing their ground. They don't move at all. So they don't say any of the ages of these protesters, but a lot of them look like our age or younger. Like they're late teens, early 20s, maybe mid 20s. These are like young people, maybe going to the University of Oregon, which is in Eugene.
Right.
And they are not moving. They are willing to get run over.
Nice. Same.
They also have started to do things like letter writing, trying to pressure public officials while still occupying this road. And essentially, nothing is changing. The national government is not reversing its decision to open up Warner Creek. And that means there's some frustration that is building. Fair. So, in the late 90s, in the mid 90s, this group of young people start to hear rumors of a new style of protest moving through environmentalist groups. They call it a couple things. They call it monkey wrenching. They call it eco defense. They call it sabotage. And then I put muck duck. I don't remember what episode that was. Maybe actually Unabomber, but...
Maybe. Actually, yeah. It's the Mafia episode of The Office.
And all of it is about low-level frustrations for these companies to basically put up a little bit of inertia that, like, fine, we'll go somewhere else, right? Like, we're not going to cause any physical violence, but we are just going to kind of make it inconvenient. So, like, surveyor groups would come through and put stakes in, and in the middle of the night, they would gather all of the stakes. They would completely underdo like days worth of survey work. They would at times like glue things together that you didn't want glued together, right?
This is chaotic good.
This is chaotic good. There's also, and I love this interview. He was like, this interview goes, yeah, like maybe some people, I don't know, I forget if they actually, but like maybe some people put like sugar in the gas tank of these like $500,000 bulldozers and dumpsters.
I love that.
I do too, because there's no maybe about that. They poured it in. You're the engineer.
Yeah.
Do you want to tell our listeners what happens if you put a little sugar in a gas tank?
Shit rusts. It totally breaks everything down.
Like it won't siphon any of the oil into the, or gasoline into the engine.
I couldn't tell. I don't know the specifics of engines because I'm not a mechie. But
right. She's getting towed away.
Sugar water, not fuel.
And it's like low-key kind of working. It's like slowing down the work. And so in addition to all of this muck duck, they are also like, well, there's one access road in or out. And we've proven that like a small obstacle, like a human body, will stop them. So what if we did more things like that? So they drag huge boulders onto the road, like from the surrounding area. And then once those are up, they get shovels and dig huge trenches that cut straight through this road, right? To the point where like even a bulldozer, because the trench is so wide and so deep, a bulldozer is not able to drive over it. And then it's so cute. There'll be like little planks of wood so they can still walk over the trenches that they were digging, but like you can't drive anything.
Get a machinery over that.
And then they were like, God, if there was some way to kind of like seal this off, like that would be even better. And so they do, and they build a little fort called Earth First.
Shut up. This is lame as.
It is. Please describe what this fort looks like.
It's just like, imagine a fort in like the Old West. There's just like a bunch of logs, like all standing up, and like a big ass canvas sign saying Earth First.
They took one of the signs that says construction on roadway and put DE in front of it. Deconstruction on roadway.
Wait, I love this. This needs to be framed.
So what you are seeing right here just looks like the little opening in the middle. So what that actually is the drawbridge down.
Over the trench.
There's a trench in front of this fence.
I love that.
To prevent like a bulldozer coming and like knocking it over. And they would lower down a drawbridge to like let people in. And then behind this wall is like tents and stuff. Like they are there to prevent anything happening to this forest. I want to make sure I didn't lose any of the fantastic details about this part of the build walls. The idea was really the trenches with the fort, etc., is like you wouldn't need to keep all of the activists there all of the time in order to protect this forest, right? Like there was going to be no ability to like patch this up in the middle of the night and then start running trucks. Right. And I want to point out too that in this photo of the fort, it's actually winter. Like you're thinking like, oh, it's a bright, shiny day. Like it's fun to camping.
It does not look like it's fun to be out there.
No, I think they're having fun because they feel good about what they're doing.
Yeah.
It is absolutely Daniel McGowan's mugshot in terms of like we're doing something.
Yeah.
but it doesn't look like a good time to camp.
No.
And they're like packing out all their waste. And they're
yeah.
doing everything that you're supposed to do environmentally.
Yeah.
But that
there's
means
not a spot of litter.
correct. That means there's a lot of buckets full of poop that you're carrying down or carrying to wherever it needs to
Gross.
go
Yeah.
or getting buried
Yeah.
somewhere. Luxury is nice. It's why it's called luxury. So these activists stay up there for an entire year protecting this forest.
Mm-hmm.
But then, naturally, I fought the law and the law won. They wake up one morning to police from the National Forest Service being like, you have 5 minutes to exit before you get arrested. And so they get arrested.
Yeah, I was like, good luck.
Right.
Using that as a
Bulldozers
threat.
come in, destroy everything, and boom. The road's repaired, and now, like, the whole
Nothing,
process
yeah.
is going. And it's kind of like once they're into the forest, there's no way to stop them.
Yeah.
And so the whole thing happens. Well, you're a young person in the 90s, right?
'Kay.
You just spent a year living on an access road.
Right.
Only to be arrested.
Yeah.
And you're watching this beautiful forest be destroyed.
Yeah.
And not only do you have regrets, the legal punishment you're experiencing is in no way teaching you a lesson.
Right.
It is not actually serving as a way to dissuade you. If anything, it's like heartening your courage that like more needs to be done.
right.
And a lot of these people like experience grief as these logging companies come in and destroy this
Everything,
forest.
yeah.
And I mean, that might be controversial to say, but like these logging companies are coming in and clear cutting forests
Yeah.
and like harvesting the wood out, and these trees are older than the United
Yeah,
States. Like
that's
that is
hard
a
to watch,
destruction.
yeah.
It's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
And so their punishments aren't like, and don't ever do this again, go back home. They're like, okay, so we managed to stop them for a whole year.
Yeah.
How do we make that go longer?
Longer, yeah.
And how do we make it clear we're not going to tolerate
Away,
it?
yeah.
So they decide to set something on fire.
Much like Grant almost last
Here's the
night.
thing, I had actually never had that thought ever before.
Until you
I
started doing this story. Now you're like, that building would look stunning.
Yeah, absolutely. And unfortunately, it's like not a mining company's headquarters,
Nah.
so like it's morally indefensible to set it on fire. But like,
You could say that again. It's in the middle of a city.
and it's like kind of like an old historic building
Yeah,
too.
he
I mean,
would
not
not
like
have been
not
able to-
ancient, but
old
you know,
enough.
yeah, old enough.
Yeah.
Not that anything deserves to be set on fire, but that one probably like definitely doesn't. Okay, so what did I put? Okay. The cutting of the forest began. That is when the anger of these activists gets turned, not necessarily towards these logging companies, although they're pissed about these logging companies. It gets turned towards the U.S. government. You're like, you are our representative. We have
Why are you letting
contacted
me do that?
Right.
Why are you letting them do this?
Why are you
Yeah.
letting me do this? Why am I being punished?
Yeah.
Many of them are like, I'm actually doing the job I thought you were supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
And instead, you were just whoring out these national forests to corporations willing to make a profit. Again, it's the 90s. And so the U.S. National Forest Service becomes the target of their ire. Enter a man by the name of Jake Ferguson, who apparently at a party was like, all right, we done fucking talking about this? Or are we going to do some real shit about it, right? And
Terrifying.
yeah. Oh, because in addition to Jake Ferguson, who's kind of like classic Pacific Northwest grunge, right? Like has like a gauge earring and like a couple of tattoos already by this point, and like keeps drinking this like brown liquid out of like a mason jar in one of these videos, and like always has a cigarette. When he was like, are we done talking or are we actually going to do something about it? He walks the walk.
That's terrifying coming from a man, because it can either be this, like, what are we doing here? Like, let's stop the logging company. Or it could be like, what are we doing here? Let's just take that small village.
Yeah. And that's what he does. They're like, you know what would actually tell the U.S. Forest Service, do not call your police on us again, is if we find out where their police headquarters are in
And
the
burn it
realm of-
down.
And burn it down.
Yeah,
And so
of
they
course.
find
Why
the
not?
Oak Ridge Ranger Station and they set it on fire. And I mean set it on fire.
Oh, it's gone. There's only steel beams left.
It is gone. Have you been seeing this TikTok? And it's like, oh, what is it? It's like steel beams and like veneer wood. You know? Okay.
No.
I don't have any way to describe it more
Okay.
than what I've already done. Okay. So I love that I put this here and then wrote nothing, but fortunately I know this.
Yeah.
So they set this thing on fire.
Yeah.
Because their fury is directed towards the National Forest Service. National Forest Service.
Right.
Not actually part of the U.S. National Park System. Do you know what it's a part of?
No, I don't remember.
It's part of the U.S. Department of Agriculture.
Nice.
So this is a little quick history lesson that I want to talk about for a second. Regularly, the national park system here in the U.S. is viewed as one of the biggest accomplishments the United States has ever achieved, especially in comparison to other countries.
Yeah.
Especially out west, where like European and then American colonization and settlement hadn't completely stripped everything. Like we preserved millions of acres of land for future generations. Little history quiz. Do you know the U.S. president that created the National Park Service?
Was it this big stick guy, wasn't it?
It was. It was Teddy Roosevelt. Yeah. Teddy Roosevelt, born in New York, had asthma as a child. He was like, I don't want to have asthma. So he becomes a cowboy in North Dakota, comes back with no asthma and a bloodlust. So he actually fights in Cuba in the Spanish-American War for a little bit. But then comes back and he's like, perfect, fantastic resume to run for higher office. He does. Last office he holds is the presidency. And he pushes through the creation of the National Park Service. And that's a huge accomplishment and good for him. It is a little unclear historically if he did it because he loved the environment or if he loved hunting things in the environment.
Yeah.
Had you heard that part?
I did. And then isn't there a whole other thing that it was all part of like, I don't want to say Reconstruction. Like some program to like help the economy that a lot of this was part of.
Part of it helps check like the greed that characterized the Gilded Age.
Yeah.
So he manages to get the National Park Services created.
Right.
And the bill that does it allows presidents to just kind of create them. But there was an opponent from, I believe, at the time, the state of Oregon, who was working for lobbyists from the lumber company. And they were like, fine, we're going to pass this law, but we're going to put a date on it.
Right.
And all of these parks have to be created before like this day. Exactly.
Yeah.
And so there's a bunch of parks, specifically in the Pacific Northwest, that are called midnight forests because Teddy Roosevelt, with the work of his aides, literally finalized the paperwork in like midnight, the wee hours right before the midnight deadline. And by the time the like due date rolled around, it was fine. They had preserved basically everything they had sought to preserve initially. And I think that's a really cool history of the national parks.
Love that.
So anyways, the U.S. National Forest Service, not part of that really cool system, even though their uniforms are like really similar. Yep, Jake Ferguson. Okay, so they set the thing on fire, and I think honestly at that point I'm like, like that's very funny.
Nice, yeah.
Two things you should know about this fire. First, no one's in the building.
No one died.
No one gets hurt. No one gets hurt as they break into it.
Yeah.
It gets set. They leave no evidence, and the fire does not spread. They manage to. I mean, obviously these people care about
the environment. Yeah, they don't want it to become a whole thing.
They manage to, or at least they take great care to make sure that the fire will damage the building, and in this case, it completely wipes it off. But they aren't trying to like set the entire forest on fire.
Right.
And so then it immediately gets picked up in the news, and immediately they're like, "This was arson."
Yeah,
The fire started in the middle of like the office room, right? This is definitely arson,
right?
And it shocks the nation and really divides environmental groups. And then I had to write this part. In activist circles throughout the country, the act creates real division. Several of the more mainstream activist organizations viewed the arson as a bad thing, pointing out, and I put in parentheses, probably correctly, that arson and burning things down isn't how change is supposed to happen in a democracy.
I mean, you're not wrong.
Right. Seeing a real difference between like nonviolent protest and civil disobedience and like felony arson charges.
Yeah, I mean it is quite a leap.
Right.
But I like get it, you know. Like sometimes when people aren't listening, like that's why some of the like other protests we've seen recently have gone violent because they're like, no, like hello? Hi.
Right.
Hi.
All of this protest and like nothing's changing, and it's not like an insistence that I have to get my way or else, but it's like we are doing
you
moral
hearing
and
me?
physical damage to like the fabric of our country.
Yeah.
And so a lot of these mainstream environmentalist organizations like aren't based in Oregon.
Yeah.
But a lot of these young upstarts who
Right.
like kind of moved to Oregon and then got
Right.
involved in environmental activism as they like cared about their community.
Right.
A lot of them were like, hell yeah.
Yeah.
Have you seen the show Portlandia?
No.
Okay.
No.
Never mind then. The very opening scene of episode 1, season 1, is the cast of Portlandia singing the song, "The dream of the 90s is alive in Portland. The dream of the 90s is alive in Portland." And it's a bunch of people in like LA and Dallas and like New York who like leave their jobs
Why can
and
I
move
see
to New York.
Jess from New Girl
Oh,
doing
100%.
exactly that?
100%.
Yeah.
It's Fred Armisen, and it's, I forget what the other main actress is, but
Yeah, yeah.
yes. Okay, so this happens also during a really interesting time for the city of Eugene, Oregon as
Okay.
well, okay? A lot of these environmentalists are kind of like new to the city, or they're young people, so they're college students affiliated with the University of Oregon, which is based in Eugene. But like the Eugene City Council, the like political establishment of Eugene, Oregon, is like business owners and like community leaders, and it's like your traditional crop of people who run a municipal government, right?
Yeah.
So there's this organization in downtown Eugene, Oregon called Syntac, I think, right? Yes. Okay. Cool. I'm exactly where I thought it was too. Hooray!
Yay!
So there's an organization in downtown Eugene called Syntec, and they want to build a new parking lot. And in order to do this, they need to cut down. There's about 40 trees, but they're like old and gorgeous, and they're tall. It's at this point where I put paved paradise, put up a parking lot from like Joni Foster or Joni Mitchell or whatever. And so it gets announced that they are going to cut down these trees and literally put up a parking lot.
Yeah.
And this activist group activates and start writing letters. They start questioning public officials.
Yeah.
They're like, please do not do this.
Yeah.
And then this like kind of ragtag environmentalist group is like, we plan on addressing this at the next city council meeting.
Like they're supposed to.
Right. This is an issue. And so the city council, in a really smart move, is like, great, we'll cut the trees down the day before the next city council meeting.
Called it.
Right.
Yep.
And so that happens all very quickly. And these environmentalists are like, oh my God. And so they run to the trees and they climb up the trees.
Nice.
Now, this is all said like in post, right?
Yeah.
But the activists claim that their goal in climbing these trees was to wait 24 hours, wait until the city council meeting occurs, and then they could talk about the trees, right? That like you were just trying to cut them down before we could even have the meeting.
Let's
and this
talk
is
first.
Right, because you can't put them back up if we change your mind.
Yeah,
Like, once they're down, they're down.
Yeah.
And so the city of Eugene is like, yeah, okay, fair. We didn't realize it meant that much to you. And they delay the cutting down process. I'm lying. No, they don't at all.
Yeah.
They call them the state police and their fire department. And they get these huge fire engine trucks, and they get the bucket that and they put police officers in the buckets, and they go up to these protesters who are like high up in these trees and basically spray pepper spray directly into these people's faces for hours. And then they are up there like cutting their clothes off and like stripping them out of these trees, bringing them back down. And then they cut the trees down in front of all of these activists like 12 hours before the city council meeting.
See, this is why you get political violence, babes. If you can't get mad at the protesters for not following decorum when you yourself won't follow decorum.
Right. So these activists are stripped from these trees, both literally and figuratively. Like their clothes are ripped off of them. Many of them are coming down stained orange. So much pepper spray has been poured on them to get them out.
Just like can't be good for them.
No, some of them experience temporary blindness for the next couple of days. And so they have been brought to the hospital where they are treated, and then they are brought to jail. And Syntac builds its parking lot. And
a parking lot.
If Warner Creek and the protest on that street, or on that access road, had taught them that, like, civil disobedience accomplishes more than like the civil process does.
Yeah.
This example, in the heart of the town that many of them have started to gather in, pushes them over the edge. It radicalizes them.
Because they were doing something simple to like be like, hey, you said we could talk about it.
Right.
Let's actually talk about it. And then they were like, oh, no, we said we would talk about it after we're done.
Right. We said we were going to talk about it much in the same way. I'm like, we can think about getting McDonald's on the way home when like, we're definitely not going to do
McDonald's.
that. Like, I have thought about it. No.
Yes.
And I just like...
A question that I did actually hear a student ask Grant when I was on the field trip with the students.
Mister, are we gonna get pizza after this? No, why not? Because we have to go back to school. Why? We're done. That was enough information, actually.
I don't know how to tell you more.
That's how you can tell I'm like really into my teaching career, because there is absolutely a runway of questions I will answer, and it's like you're gonna have to just kind of learn to live with the information you have been given.
Can't answer everything for you.
I also like, I do think the Oregon City Council like failed to do its number one job, which is to like be a forum of like civic discourse, right? I would still probably be upset if like they hold the meeting, they're like, thank you for expressing your opinion. Yeah. The answer's still no.
And to be fair, the activists probably wouldn't have accepted no.
Right,
anyway.
100%.
Yeah, but still, like, they didn't even allow for that to happen.
The intentional cutting down the day before the meeting, like, no takes backsies.
Yeah, I mean, you made martyrs out of them.
Right.
Which historically, don't fucking do that, my dude. If you have any fault in the situation, you're just drawing more people to the other side. You need to exonerate yourself of any fault by following the correct channels, and then you can still do whatever the fuck you want. But then at that point, anyone that might have been on the fence would have been like, well, they followed the rules.
And
like,
also, you have, in a conversation like that, it's so important, you've like kind of taken the moral center ground. You know, you're like, we did talk about it. We don't agree with you. And we're going to move forward. But we, like, you had a chance. And if you're mad, like, run for city council and then change the policy.
It like that. But they didn't fucking... Also, pronounce the state that we're working in now.
Oregon.
Is it Oregon? Or you said something earlier that I was like...
Eugene?
No.
Oregon?
Oregon.
Oh, yeah. You sure?
Oregon?
Oregon. It's Oregon, but Oregon. I mean, everyone knows what I mean. Has that been in your brain forever?
For at least the last 5 minutes.
The thing I'm going to tell you about horses in a couple of minutes is going to move fast. Yeah, no, sorry. We're not there yet. It's the most graphic part of the episode. But real quick, before we move to that incident.
Yeah.
So obviously this documentary, which is friendly to the eco-defense groups. Yeah. Also known as eco-terrorism groups. Yeah. They have a lot of video, again, from that moment in time, 1990, I think, 1998, 1996, in Eugene, Oregon. And I think as Americans, we've gotten really used to seeing videos of police brutality. Right. Of pepper spraying, of law enforcement aggressively, like, handling or manipulating bodies, and to, like, clear a protest. Yep. And we're not going to dive deep into that, but I think many of us know where Maya and I land on it. That was uncomfortable to watch, but not shocking. Yeah. What actually surprised me as how emotional it was is the last couple clips you see from that event in this documentary is them cutting down the actual trees. And they're giant, they're gorgeous. And you hear people, like, grief screaming, like, in the audience. Like, for these people, it's not so much like, I hate Syntech, or like, trees are nice. Like, these are people... Like, who the destruction of these trees is like an emotional experience for them to have to go through. And I wasn't prepared to hear like that kind of grief. It sounds like they've lost somebody. Yeah, like, they are absolutely sincere in their actions.
I mean, they've spent years of their life probably at this point advocating for these trees. So
I just feel like sometimes you get anarchists and you're like, yeah, you just like kind of want to set things on fire, and like the political cause is the convenient way to get there. For a lot of these people, it's like, no, like this political cause is everything to them. So now we're going to enter Jake Ferguson and the elf. And then in parentheses, and horses.
Before we do that, can we take
Absolutely,
a break?
we can.
Cool.
Hey, you can tell I... Here we go.
Are we live?
Because I like to say to all of my sophomores whenever I ask them to do literally anything at all, including breathe, if you can't get out of it, get into it.
Ew.
Okay, so we're back.
We're back.
Thoughts, feelings, reactions so far.
Honestly, I'm with them.
They're 110% correct. There's no issue at all with them whatsoever.
Yeah.
They're lucky they didn't burn down City Hall.
Actually, yeah, a little.
Okay, so in Oregon at this time is our friend Jake Ferguson, the one who set the Ranger building on fire. And he is like, now this like tree incident in Oregon has just proven to him civil discourse and the appropriate civic channels is not going to change anything.
True, yeah.
So let's just go ahead and give up on that and instead get real quiet and secretive and not tell anyone what we're doing and form a terrorist organization.
I hate that he's not really wrong.
And what's super crucial here, if you're like conflicted about all of this, is at no point in the founding of the Earth Liberation Front is the mission and vision physical harm on any human.
Yeah.
It is 100% dedicated to denying organizations or the government the physical infrastructure to hurt the planet.
Right.
But they're not like, and then we're gonna get
Kill ya.
We're gonna get Bill Clinton, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Okay.
They're not the Unabomber.
Right. Okay, so it is now 1996 and the early days of ELF. I'm going to be using that phrase a lot because I think it's fun.
Yeah.
Earth Liberation Front.
Right.
Which reminds me a lot of the Patty Hearst group, like the Siamese Liberation Front.
Yeah, Symbionese.
One more time. That's that one. And then there's also an Animal Liberation
Siamese.
Front. Everything was a liberation front, and it was so few people that you couldn't block off one road with your front.
Right.
But that's fine.
Yeah.
Let's just call it... When you see something that ends with LF, just it ends with Liberation Front. You just have to figure out what it is they're trying to defend or liberate. So Jake Ferguson founded ELF, 1996. Content warning for animal abuse and death. It's really rough for about the next 15 seconds. It's not overly graphic, but it's sad.
Yeah.
So plus 15 now, if that's not something you want to hear. Jake Ferguson and his group here... specifically by reading an article in, I think, Time, that the federal government is rounding up wild horses that are roaming on public land, bringing them to corrals, and then bringing them to processing facilities to be processed.
Yikes.
One of them specifically is called the Cavil West plant in Redmond, Oregon, which is super close to Eugene.
Yeah.
This plant is processing so many animals that the blood from the plant sometimes overwhelms the water treatment plant of the community, and the water treatment plant has to be shut down for a little bit.
Oh, God.
That is how many animals they are processing. And then the meat is being sold to Europe or companies that are doing something with it. And here's what I want you guys to note, too. So it's a small town that has this processing plant in it. And the locals there... maybe not a majority, but there is a very vocal group of locals there who want to shut the plant down and have protested for years and have tried to get it shut down.
Yeah.
And, the city government either isn't able to or isn't able to have, like, the political courage, or it's not, like, a universally agreed upon thing, but there is a huge movement locally to try to get this plant shut down, and it's not getting shut down.
Yeah.
And so... on July 21st, 1997, Jake Ferguson and 3 others slip into the plant at night and set it on fire.
Okay.
It burns down completely. It is so burnt down, the company is not able to rebuild.
Good.
And the plant stays shut down permanently forever.
Good.
To this day. And suddenly, this tiny little group of people, ran by Jake Ferguson, has a model. In one night, they had managed to accomplish what years of letter writing and protesting and pressuring
channels
hadn't accomplished. They had shut down the plant forever, and no one got hurt. No one died.
Yeah.
And no one's going to be able to pin it on them. They are meticulous about how they prepare. It's all these timers, too, in these incendiary devices. So by the time it goes up, they're
gone.
Long gone. And so... I was really proud when I wrote this.
Yeah.
And so, the Earth Liberation Front catches fire. See what I did there?
Fuck up. Grant just made a face not that dissimilar to the mugshot we saw earlier. Like a small boy just got back from summer camp.
Hit into my passion,
Yeah.
leaning into
Yeah.
that bulldozer.
Oh, that's pretty funny.
So they add more members, they add more targets, they start to burn down things like the headquarters of logging companies.
Yeah.
They burn down a station of the Bureau of Land Management. They burn down in 1997 one huge prize
Freudian slip.
to be revealed later.
Okay.
And a separate group of activists set up an elf press office. So in order to make all of this happen, the people who are actually committing the arson have to stay as anonymous as possible.
Right.
And so a different group of activists open up the elf press office. They are contacted anonymously by
Okay.
elf with
Okay.
an explanation for why they targeted what they targeted. And then this elf press office that is in no way affiliated with the
Connected
crime
with elf, yeah.
or have any knowledge as to who it is, then goes on public television, then goes on Larry King, then goes on
Wow.
whoever and talk about it.
Wait, that's actually genius.
Yes, the people that you can identify as part of ELF
Are not actually-
You can't arrest them for
Yeah.
anything, and even if you did, they actually have no information
Yeah.
that they can offer
They wouldn't
you.
even be able to connect you.
Right, they'll get unmarked letters or things
Yeah.
like that, right? Occasionally, some of these letters, like just to the ELF press office, will include like, here's the book, and then like a week later, like a set of numbers, and you have to go to like a page, and then like a line, and then a word, and so they are getting, there's like codes that ELF is using that they can then use to like, this was a real communication, this isn't a real communication
Oh, okay,
kind of
gotcha,
stuff.
yeah.
But they're able to be this public mouthpiece for this organization that's very anonymous. So this elf press office will explain why they chose the targets, because when a building burns down, it makes the news.
Yeah.
Oh, and then once they had kind of started to like establish credibility and get going, the elf press office tells people to anonymously start their own cells.
We did it, and you can do it too.
No,
Yeah.
literally. There's a video of one of these elf press office people, and I have the actual quote. He's walking through a forest. He looks like a reject from like National Park Ranger School.
Yeah.
Like has everything, but like hair is a little long, you know?
Right, yeah.
And he says this directly into the camera that they then disseminate, that they then put out. They say, quote, "Take initiative, form your own cell, and do what needs to be done to protect all life on this planet."
Oh, I'm still on their side. I'm just so anxious about what this next part of the story is gonna take us. Oh Jesus.
Hold on, where was I? So, Maya,
Oh God.
I have a question.
Yes.
What do you think Elf is feeling in this moment? What are the lessons they're learning? What are the tea leaves they're reading in this moment?
They're learning that they have more power than they thought. They're learning that the public probably supports them more than they thought.
Mm-hmm.
And they're also probably getting too confident. Yeah.
This is now the late 90s, and these activist groups have perhaps the most important ingredient, the most important fuel to a fire: hope.
Oh God.
And they're also noticing that, like, they're starting to make the news. There's some second guessing around some of these decisions. They are expressing openly dissatisfaction with both the system and what the system is producing. And they've deduced one really important lesson.
Oh no.
They are really close to creating some actual change. They just need to be a little more radical to really push it over the edge.
If that's ever your thought and you're the head of a radical cell, no, you don't. No, you don't.
I love
Actually, you'll lose followers.
I love the idea of us talking to listeners being like, and when you start your own anonymous cell, make sure you have a real check on your radicalism. And
Be honest, did you get an anonymous letter telling you to talk about this?
I am the press office. Which is so tough. It means I can't ever meet any of them, but it's like, fine, like I didn't even want to be invited anyways, and it's like I'll like it on Instagram. It's like cool to like see it happening
fine,
from
I
afar.
guess. It's okay. It's
Total
fine.
FOMO. Not listen, I can keep a secret. That you can trust me with. I cannot miss an event. So I would have to be in or I'm out.
Yeah. He really leverages FOMO every time.
Literally yesterday I was like, I don't know, I got like a lot of grad work to do, and there's like Danny's pride party. Maya, I might have to cancel on going to the theater show. And you were like, oh, like, I'm disappointed, but I get it. And I go, okay, well, I'm in.
It's like, at no point did I ever say that we needed to go.
You were like, I'm super supportive of you.
Yeah, that's fine.
And I was like, all right, fine. I'll wake up early,
Yeah.
a little hungover, do my reading then. Twist my arm. I didn't even get bagels this morning.
I was asleep.
I know. It's even funny too, during this documentary, when a tree falls, they show clips of because these cells do grow.
Yeah.
Like there are cells now that are starting all over the country doing these things.
Yeah.
As one news reporter said in her sing-songy little voice, she goes, the Earth Liberation Front is turning up the heat again, this time setting fire to a lab at the University of Minnesota. And it's like, maybe don't like sing-song
like
your
that.
way to that. Exactly.
I feel like reporters have two voices. The voice for reporting neutral or good news,
Yes.
and the voice for reporting bad news.
And so in addition to all of this activity, encouraging other elf cells to pop up anonymously
Right.
and commit like arson and things like that. It's also encouraging more public but defiant protest. People chaining themselves to things. People
okay.
like there becomes this emboldenedness in the environmental rights movement, and
Right.
it causes like a real reflection in America around like our environmental policies.
Yeah.
And of course, that's a joke again. It's just like, do you know what would fix this? More police. And so you have these sleeper cells that are like escalating.
Yeah.
You have people who are now physically like disobeying, locking themselves together, and police who are like, absolutely not. You will not be doing this. There are clips of people who are like, they'll put their arms in like a metal tube, and then they will like hold on to each other, or they'll like handcuff each other to each other, and then they'll be like stuck there. And they're not trying to hide. They're like very
Yeah.
clearly trying to stop something. There's videos of police taking like pepper spray into like a towel or whatever, and they go, "Are you gonna let go?" And they're like, "No." They're like, "Are you gonna let go?" And the protesters will be like, "Non-violence shouldn't be met with violence." And then they would
Yeah.
go, "Okay." And then they would hold your face and wipe the pepper spray into your eyes. And they're like screaming, "Oh yeah, yeah."
That's
Again.
so insane.
Correct. Again, this documentary had a bias.
That's
But
true.
I saw what I saw as well. You know, like there was a moment where a young girl gets pepper sprayed smeared into her eyes.
Just like-
and I believe she was in like the lobby of like a mining company's headquarters, you know?
There are just so few times I'm on the side of the police.
And this,
Oh God.
so the actions of ELF do not get law enforcement to cool off, but then the actions of law enforcement don't get ELF to cool off
yeah.
either. And so then there are these like protests in the streets, and it's so Pacific Northwest coded, and it's so 90s grunge coded. You have
My
guys
favorite.
in like bucket hats being like, "No, fuck you!" Like they're all like squaring up with the police, and it's like a free love tie-dye T-shirt, you know? Like it is.
I just saw a comedy sketch the other day, or a comedy, like a stand-up comedy section. It's from Josh Johnson, I think. He's a reporter for The Daily Show
Okay.
right now, or correspondent is what they call him, correspondent. And he was like, I don't understand, like, men, you know, like when they get into a fight, they'll be like right here, you know? And it's like, this distance doesn't make any sense for what you're doing. Like, if you're here, you could do some damage. You could throw a punch.
Right.
If you're here, that's a little too close.
Okay, we're having a conversation.
If you're here, you can't punch me without punching us.
Yeah.
It's just,
Us.
yeah.
So everyone's kind of doing exactly what they want, which is political violence against my enemies.
Yep.
And then
Oh,
I
geez.
mentioned to Jacob and Lydia the other night a reference to the movie Step Brothers, starring Will Ferrell.
Yes.
Right? And do you remember how that movie ends? It ends with the Catalina wine mixer. You're familiar with that?
Oh,
There's like
God,
a
it's been
helicopter and
so
stuff.
long.
Catalina wine mixer is just like this joke. It's just like a social thing.
Yeah.
So then in 1999, America has its own little Catalina wine mixer. And by that I mean the World Trade Organization International Summit in Seattle, Washington. Okay. I put the World Trade Organization International Summit in Seattle, 1999. Or, alternative title, a mixer for environmental activists, radicals, and terrorists. Because everyone's there to protest the World Trade Organization, and there's so many people
so many
protesting
different
it.
kinds of
Exactly.
protests.
And there's so many things to be upset at the World Trade Organization about.
Yeah.
Right? Like the fact that the World Trade Organization promotes economic policies that perhaps encourages the exploitation of underpaid labor in developing economies. Or like how the World Trade Organization is built on the premise of like kind of endless consumption and capitalism, and like how that's super bad, or, you know, all sorts of different things. So there's a lot of people there who are upset, and of course they're blocking off streets and insisting they're not violent, and then of course they're met with violence, and so they're like, all right, fine, time to riot.
You got us.
Oh, shucks. Well, I mean, I guess it's a good thing I brought this club. Smash.
Jesus.
And so the documentary has all these clips at the time of like protests happening in downtown Seattle.
Yeah.
And I have two Insta reactions.
Okay.
The first, I recognized one of my favorite burrito places in this video from 1999. It's this burrito place like right next to Cal Anderson Park. And I'm like, I've been there. It's a great place. Second, I have to show you this video from 2020. So not the 1999 Catalina wine mixer, but instead from Fox News covering the protests in like downtown Seattle in 2020.
Given the experience you have covering these protests, Deborah, and
This is just a giant ass cake.
the cheesecake there after the Cheesecake Factory was looted. Unclear where they may have gotten that, but
After the Cheesecake Factory was looted, like, we are now getting reports the Cheesecake Factory has fallen to the insurgents.
That's the end of Seattle.
I repeat, the Cheesecake Factory has fallen to the insurgents. Loyalist forces have withdrawn to the Applebee's. And it was my favorite.
If you're receiving word of this and you need someplace safe to go, please retreat to the Applebee's and order 2 $1 drinks over happy hour. That's how we'll know it's you.
Non-U.S. citizens, please report to the local Outback Steakhouse so your local consulate can get you back. Okay, so here's just a picture. It's a woman.
love that.
They raided a Cheesecake Factory, not specifically, just kind of in like a everything's being targeted.
Everyone was being looted.
I'm not making a statement in support or opposition to looting. I am saying like the Cheesecake Factory has fallen.
While she carries a full
No,
cheesecake.
it's even better. Not only is she carrying a full cheesecake, but she is stopped at a crosswalk because it's not time to walk yet. She
wearing
is
like a face mask.
Yes.
Also, it should be noted,
The
cheesecake
windbreaker.
in perfect condition.
Absolutely. She did take the plate.
Oh,
like,
yeah,
there is
yeah.
a ceramic plate underneath it, but it's like, I struggle to assume that we have hit just like chaos and anarchy.
When someone is looting someplace and it's like,
Right.
yeah, I mean, I could go for a
I
cheesecake.
could take this cheesecake, but then being like, it's actually super unsafe to cross when it's not your time to
Yeah,
cross.
yeah.
Like, you're in a relationship with the vehicles.
Yeah.
Like, there's not a car in front of where she's
No,
at. And she's just holding the cheesecake. Like, no one's bumping into her. No one's stealing her cheesecake.
No.
Jacob and Lydia lived in Seattle
Yeah.
at the time.
Yes.
And so there was all this national coverage of like, Seattle has fallen, right? Like
Yes, I
very much
remember.
like 28 days
The
later
big
or whatever.
square, yeah.
Right. And they were like, actually, Seattle, I mean, kind of funny, but like downtown Seattle's used to festivals during the summer.
Yeah.
Like it's kind of just like a lot that same vibe.
Yeah. Like something's different and it's not necessarily wrong.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you a question that one of these 1999 news anchors asked a small business owner. She was like looting is terrible, and like these are people's like small businesses, and like it's never okay to like commit property damage, like regardless of what your political opinion is. And then the news reporter goes, "Oh, absolutely. So what are your thoughts on the Boston Tea Party?" And she's like, "Oh, I loved that."
Huh.
And like,
interesting how history is written on the side of one side or the other.
and you know, like I could give a whole 20-minute TED talk on how like that's an okay thing for us to celebrate because ultimately that side won and then wrote our like national founding narrative, and like that's why it's like celebrated in that way. But like, you know, the victor writes the story, and like it's complex narrative, and also like a lot of the people who did the Boston Tea Party were like wealthy white men of like status and importance in their
that
communities.
makes it okay.
But I don't know anything about history. If you were to look at some of our TikToks and the comment sections, actually, if you stopped reading Jared Diamond for like 1 second, you would know more. And it's like, you're right. If I didn't read just Jared Diamond, I would know more. But I went to Jared.
If that woman would stop talking and start listening, she might be more educated.
I think my favorite things about us are our capacity for love, real, and our willingness and ability to get over things, not
Never.
real.
I will never get over anything.
And so it was at the 1999 World Trade Organization Summit in Seattle,
Right.
like that protest, that prompted Daniel McGowan to move to the Pacific Northwest. So let's go back for a second.
yeah.
The man that we met at the start of this whole
He
story.
hasn't been here for any of this.
No, he's been going to some protests and stuff, but for the most part, he is in New York still
Okay.
with those organizations, or he's bouncing around to causes, but he's not permanently
Getting
moved.
arrested while also having the best time,
Time
of
was
his
like,
life.
listen, all none of these people looked like they were miserable doing
Yeah.
what they were doing.
Yeah.
And so he meets some people, he falls in love with a girlfriend, and they become part of ELF.
Okay.
They then interview an exec of a lumber company, okay?
Oh, God.
At this point in the documentary, right? Our main hero or villain or protagonist, Daniel McGowan,
Yeah.
has now gotten to his Mordor or
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah.
He has joined the radicals in the Pacific Northwest. So they cut to an exec from a lumber company.
Bold of this guy to agree to this documentary.
And the exec points out that lumber companies want to stay in business and thus would never cut down, quote, the last tree. They also point out that they plant 6 trees for every tree they cut down, which is the law in Oregon. Activists point out that there is no way to regrow an old growth forest.
True.
And then I love how I wrote this. It then jumps back to Daniel McGowan, and it's just a quote, and he goes, "I used to get really sick right before actions." Daniel McGowan, talking about the night before he committed a huge arson.
Yeah, I would just get really nervous. I don't know why.
I just think, oh God, part of me was like, oh, am I doing the right thing? But then I'm like, no, focus. Like, we have an arson to commit. And then I would just, and then afterwards, like, what's done is done, and ashes to ashes.
Yeah, fucking lumber companies being like, well, we'll regrow it.
We're going to circle back to that lumber company in just a second.
Oh my God.
Do I?
It was really cool. I don't remember if it was me in Seattle when I saw this or if I heard about this before I went to Seattle, but the like areas that are operated by lumber companies in Washington, they'll have like sections of trees that they cut, right, and they kind of move through the different sections. So they'll cut down a section, replant it, and then that section won't be cut for another like however many years, and then the next year they'll cut the next section in the like order of stuff, and that's really cool. Stop cutting down old growth.
Yeah. And there's
there are ways around it.
also that sad thing where it's like they don't cut anything a quarter mile from a road because it makes
Yeah.
people sad to see it from the road, but like it just like stops being forest after a little bit. Sorry if that's a
hate
little
people.
dystopian.
No.
Anyways, the
This
exact
whole thing is dystopian. You just told me about how animals were dying at such a capacity that
not anymore.
this is yeah. You want to know a fun fact about wild horses?
So 1, yes. 2, where's Maggie Rogers?
Yes. I was recently like thinking about. I was talking to Casey about something, but I was Mustangs when they get caught and like sold to people, right? And then they get branded,
Right.
right? Do you know what that brand looks like?
Isn't it just like someone's initials or whatever?
No, it's down the left side of their neck.
Oh.
It's freeze branding, so they're not like getting burned anymore. It's like the hair is getting frozen so that it'll grow back white.
Oh.
Yeah, so the hair does get like taken off, but then it'll grow back white, and that way it's permanent, but it's not like a permanent like scab like you've like probably seen in like old westerns.
Animals,
But they'll brand them with like I don't remember what it is. It's like the estimated date of birth maybe, or the capture year or something like that, and then like where they came from. And it's so funny because wild horses are like pretty common in the West Coast.
Right.
And so all of the different states have their separate code. And so there's like Colorado, there's like Montana, New Mexico,
Idaho,
Nevada, California, all that stuff. And then there's another code, East.
Where does that start? Like
I don't know.
Dakotas and...
Probably.
I love that.
But they're like, there's not enough of you for us to...
East.
Yeah, East Coast.
It's one of those more... the Great Bagel recipe, but kind of aggressive to the other horses.
Yeah.
Anyways, I do remember why they interviewed that lumber company exec. His headquarters did get burnt down in the 90s. Aww. But I will say this. So... that was actually one of the first arsons Daniel McGowan helped set fire to.
Nice.
And so you have the exec sitting in his rebuilt office talking about like, yeah, it was wild to get targeted and here's what we do after we like harvest wood and stuff like that. And Daniel McGowan talking about like how they burnt his place down. But one of the things they say too is like they had observed that headquarters for months before that action took place. And so they were like, we knew who the cleaning ladies were. Like they didn't know who we were, but we knew who they were. And like we knew when they left, and we knew what it looked like if something weird had happened that night. Like we knew for a fact it was empty. And that there were no animals living there or anything. Right. Yeah. And then we set that thing on fire. And so I would say at this point in the late 90s, early 2000s, when Daniel McGowan joins, things are going pretty well for Elf.
Yeah.
So well, they're like, we should teach our sleeper cells how to do this without ever having to communicate with them.
Yeah.
So we're going to start a book club and we're going to write a book. I mean, here's the thing. This book actually super detailed with a lot of, I think, really interesting information.
Yeah.
They're like, so here's how you build a bomb and how you like set the timer. And not bomb like, but bomb is in like, oh my God, it's a huge fire. And it's like, there's a lot of gasoline and like, there's no way to put it out. They were like, you need to be aware about how your timer is going to burn at a different rate depending on what the temperature outside of the temperature of the room is. So if you are trying to set something on fire in like a late November night and it's like under 40 degrees, it's going to burn like this and you have this much time. But if it's in like an air conditioned office and it's like a 72 degree kind of thing, you have this amount of time.
Yeah.
And I thought that was really interesting.
That is really
I never
interesting.
even learned that. And they were like, here's how you do it. And they were like, here's how you make sure there are no fingerprints. Because here's the thing. Up until this point, they know, by say they, I mean the government knows who Elf is because Elf keeps being like, we're Elf and we set that thing on fire. They don't know anything about the organization. They don't know how it's funded. They don't know how it's structured. They don't know how many people there are. They don't know if the sleeper cells are truly sleeper cells or if they're all connected with each other. They know nothing about these organizations.
It just makes me so happy.
Because, like, they're setting fires and like a lot of these places are in like smaller towns or smaller communities. Yeah. Right? Because like that's where the lumber company is, or that's where like the ranger station is, or things like that. And so it's not like there's a lot of security cameras. It's not like there's a lot of witnesses. The book also talks about how to cover your tracks. So how to make sure that the incendiary device doesn't have any of your fingerprints.
Right.
How to start talking about a trip you're going to take in a way that's not suspicious and that everyone understands why you're gone. And they're like, so before any of this, you got to start building out
your story.
Yeah. And then it'd be like, even if your bomb only needs 3 ingredients, you're going to 3 stores, right? So you're walking in, and if you're making conversation, you're like, yep, lawnmower out of gas again, right? Stuff like that.
Yeah.
You are driving hours away from your destinations to collect all of this information. The book is disseminated. I think you could write in to Elf's press office and get it because it's instructions on how to do it, but it's not instructions on how to catch them.
Yeah,
right? It's like anybody could go to the grocery store and buy rope. Like that's everyone in America. Hasn't narrowed the list down at all.
Oh, that's hysterical, actually.
And so in the spring of 2001, the group launches its first joint attack. It's up in the Pacific Northwest, and it's attack at 2 facilities at the same time. They target 2 things. First, there's a university professor at the University of Washington who's doing research into like trees and genetics for the lumber company. His research is being funded through a lumber company grant.
It's rough.
And then in Northern Oregon, there is a tree farm that is growing genetically modified trees for the paper company that are like going to grow faster and going to grow like the way they want paper trees to come through.
Grow, yeah.
And those are going to be what these companies start planting.
Okay.
And so they target both facilities to shut that research down.
Why?
It was kind of like no one should work with these lumber companies. That needs to end now. You should like we shouldn't genetically modify these trees to like make this job easier for them. Like I think it's an attack on the lumber company itself.
But like realistically,
Yeah, no, I hear you. Go ahead.
what's the solution that they want then? 'Cause
That
it's-
documentary doesn't cover it.
Because it sounds like the genetically modified trees, and I'm not saying pro or con GMOs. I think it's a complicated topic, like that you really understand the science behind it and like the specific product. But it sounds like genetically modified trees are exactly what you want. That's something that grows faster. That means the lumber companies can avoid the old growth, and you have more of a leg to stand on. That the old growth shouldn't be touched.
Yeah. This is me filling in the gaps.
Yeah.
My read was that they were going to keep cutting down forests, and instead of planting the trees that they have to now to like repopulate the
They would
forest,
just plant GMO
these GMO trees, which would then destroy the environment even further. But that is me filling in the gap. The documentary does not actually make a great job at making the case for why these targets
Which
needed
is
to be
sus
targeted.
because they're clearly biased towards the
100%.
organization. But it's also like I can almost not see burning down the facility that's doing the GMO trees. If you're like let's talk about this, like what you're doing doesn't make sense, but like we're not opposed to this possible solution. Attacking the scientist seems like the incorrect option, unless like that. I guess there's a lot that I don't know. Like if the
so you're going to
scientist
tell them
is
how
like,
to do terrorism? Okay, Maya.
yeah. Listen, I'm violent. Like the scientist is the brains, right? Like ultimately, a lot of scientists aren't inherently good or evil. They're motivated by curiosity, right? And so like unless the scientist is like inherently evil, like which I mean, there could be evidence one way or the other,
Sure.
but like that's the person that you want with the expertise to research a solution for both of you. You don't want to fucking turn him to the other side
Right.
because then it's like, whatever. It's
So,
fine. I'm fine.
it's actually a lot happens around this specific
Yeah.
joint attack that's super important here for like the last part
Right.
/ second half / whatever of our story.
Okay.
So first, the fact that they pull out basically a simultaneous attack on 2 different targets in 2 different states at like essentially the same time.
Yes.
Totally freaks out the FBI.
I mean, I would
who
be
were
too, yeah.
already super frustrated, but now it's like this group is not only able to like commit small fires and get away with it,
Yeah.
small being a relative
Yeah,
term, small fires and get away with it, but they're now able to time out multiple attacks in
Right.
multiple states, and the tree farm is huge.
Yeah.
And a different attack, they set like 24 SUVs on fire.
Did they burn down the trees in that one?
No, they burnt down all of the buildings and stuff.
Okay, so they kept the GMO trees.
They might have burnt down the
Alive?
trees. I forget. It was definitely an attack on the infrastructure itself,
Yeah,
though.
yeah.
And so they get back to, so they set all these fires, and then they drive back to like
Their common ground,
Right, their like base camp or whatever. And well, not only is the FBI now freaked out, which they don't actually really know.
Yeah.
The attack doesn't go exactly what they want. So it gets revealed in the days afterwards that there actually are no GMO trees at the tree farm that they burnt down, but there is a huge spray-painted barn that they had left untouched that said, "Elf, you cannot control what is wild." And it's just this family tree farm that they set on fire. Yeah.
That was supporting them?
No. So the tree farm wasn't supporting Elf.
Okay.
But they also weren't actually doing anything
Anything
GMO
wrong.
research. They just like set it all on fire. And then at the University of Washington, the small little trash can fire in the professor's office actually claimed an entire library. And they get back and they watch the news coverage unfold, and the group members, including Daniel McGowan, get really frustrated because none of the news coverage is about their cause or why they're doing this.
Because they just caused a lot of
destruction.
damage.
So it's just like, this thing got burnt down. We don't know who it is, or like how, like why they did it. But like, look at these pictures of flames, and that's it for your nightly news. Now to sports, right? And so there's this huge frustration in the group. The joint attack, other than proving that they could do it, doesn't really accomplish much.
Yeah.
And now the group is having a quick little discussion. Some members of the group think they should start targeting people.
Yep.
Captains of industry,
Cool.
specifically.
Yep.
And the other half of the group is like, absolutely not. And then that first half again is like, well, let's at least have the conversation. And the second half of the group is like, if we even have the conversation, we walk. And they won't be able to reach a compromise. And so the group dissolves.
It's almost like that was the problem to start with, is that you guys couldn't talk about shit. And that's what made you mad.
It is kind of wild how like original sin kind of coming back into this group.
Oh my God, yeah. As soon as you become a big enough organization, you suddenly understand the issues with running an organization.
Right. Again, who was there for the night of that conversation that would tell us the truth in a way that wouldn't incriminate them? I don't know.
No. Yeah.
Daniel McGowan, his narrative is that the group doesn't even have the conversation because the conversation about having the conversation is so divisive that it dissolves the group.
Yeah.
At this point, Daniel McGowan has been living in the Pacific Northwest for maybe 2.5 years.
Okay.
He moved in 1999. It's 2001. It's spring of 2001. He's like, I'm out. This isn't accomplishing what I want. I'm not feeling great the night before these attacks. I'm all these conflicted emotions.
Yeah.
I'm moving back home to New York City. It's 2001.
Okay. Oh.
But the group dissipates. Obviously, there are other elf cells, but the main one kind of collapses. Mm-hmm. And everything kind of cools off. And everyone kind of forgets.
And Daniel McGowan's about to experience probably the biggest tragedy of his entire life.
Correct. Also, actual terrorism for a second.
Yeah, if you're not one of our U.S. friends, 2001 is the year 9/11 happens.
Yes. Specifically in the fall.
Yes.
And so America is already a little freaked out about homegrown terrorism, and then 9/11 happens.
Yeah, and then...
And that's bad, obviously. That didn't sound right.
No,
what I'm trying to say is it means the U.S. District Attorney's Office and the FBI cannot let this stuff go.
They're already primed.
Correct.
Yeah, and now something worse has happened. They can't.
And they're like, we have to identify this. So even though ELF really does cool off, and like you see a lot fewer attacks in the early 2000s.
The FBI still is determined to figure out who it is.
They name ELF the greatest domestic terrorist threat in the country, forgetting, of course, all of the other domestic terrorist threats in the country, including the KKK and other hate groups.
Yep.
People who have killed nobody and harmed no one.
And just want trees.
Is what we need to get in control of.
Oh God.
And so...
we just haven't changed, have we?
At all. Nothing.
No, not a damn thing.
I'm sorry, did I hear yelling in here? Punches someone in the face. I hope that's a lesson.
Punches someone trying to get your attention.
Exactly. Punches someone leaving. Yeah. I hope you all know now not to yell. Or I'm gonna get really mad. So,
and then someone is also already punching someone else.
Not a perfect analogy, but a fun one.
No, it's funny.
And so the district attorney's office is like, we gotta solve our biggest internal threat, a group that is no longer active. And so they are only vaguely able to start piecing some things together. Yeah. They know Jake Ferguson is probably involved in some of this. And Jake Ferguson's girlfriend was arrested in the same town like 2 days after an arson had taken place there, like an elf attack specifically. So they're like, okay, there's a loose connection there. I think we bring him in and lie. And so they do. They go off and they grab Jake Ferguson. They bring him in for questioning. And they're like, listen, Jake, we've really been like focused on this whole domestic terrorism thing for a while. And I don't know if you know we know, but we know you are a heroin addict. And that's
Holy
true.
Shit.
That's true.
That was not in my bingo card.
And they're essentially like, and we've been really cool about that so far.
Yeah.
And then they go, and the second thing you should know is that we know everything. We know your connection to the Earth Liberation Front. And if you want to see your child grow up in person and not behind a plate of glass, because didn't your father abandon you? Didn't you grow up without a dad? Anyways, if you want your son to grow up with a dad... they're like, if you... That was great.
Casey was like, oh my God.
Crept in to get something during the most serious part of the episode and is like, I'm going to leave. They're like, if you want your son to have a father when he grows up, you will cooperate. It's in your best interest because we know everything. And Jake Ferguson leaves with his attorney.
Oh my God.
The police know nothing.
Yeah.
Other than the fact that his girlfriend was arrested in the same town, roughly around the same time as a fire, and like a hunch, they have no evidence. They have so little evidence, I don't think they could actually present it to a grand jury to even get charges filed in the first place.
Yeah.
But they swung big and hard. And 20 minutes later, Jake Ferguson comes in and he goes, okay, I'll cooperate with you. And now they get like in. It's the first time they have a named suspect for any of this stuff.
He says, okay, I'll cooperate, and the detectives are like, fighting under the table, like, we did it.
They interview one of the cops, and one of them towards the end is like, at the very, very end of the documentary, one of the two investigators was like, you know, hindsight's a funny thing, and I think maybe we did go a little too hard on these guys. But, you know, when you get to know their story, you know, and like why they're doing it, they're not just like arsons on a fire. Like, they're a person, you know? And the second cop is like, happiest day of my life. It's when he was like, oh, right. And it's like, oh, boy, it was two roads diverge in a wood that Elf had helped protect earlier with an arson. And one of them picked the road with more arrests. Again, a perfect analogy. Where's my award? So, I
wonder if those cops still talk to each other.
I hope so.
I hope they
don't. I don't think it's a big town.
I hope neither of them speak to each other, and neither of them knew the other was being interviewed for the documentary.
My favorite part about the documentary, too, is the first cop, the one who, like, ends up with regrets eventually. He's like, you know, like, we do have a war room, like you see on, like, all those TV shows and stuff, but... You know, it's not like you see on those TV shows where it's like solved in 50 minutes. It's like a long time. And we're like, yeah, we all kind of like, you know, linearly, it took you almost a decade to catch them.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I mean, yeah.
And so they finally have an informant. They finally have an in. They can start naming people. It's like the floodgates open.
Yeah.
But they have a huge issue. Jake Ferguson is not a good witness to put on the stand. Not only is he like a documented... addict, right? Which is tough. He also has just so many tattoos, including like a satanic pentagon on his head. In all of Jake Ferguson's interviews, he's wearing a hat. That they're like, we can't put you in front of a jury. They're not going to believe convict.
You. Yeah.
We instead need your help to get all your friends on tape admitting to their crimes. And he was like, okay, how do I do that? And they go, it feels like a 90s rom-com, like My Best Friend's Wedding.
Yeah.
They're like, we're going to arrange over the next 2 years for you to accidentally run into all of your old friends. And this is when it cuts back to Daniel McGowan. And he's like, yeah, I just left like St. Josephine's Catholic Church on 185th and I ran into Jake Ferguson out of nowhere. And he's like, kind of fat and doesn't look good at all. And he's like, hey, do you want to take a walk? And I'm just so shocked to see him. I'm like, sure, man. Yeah, let's go for a walk for a little bit. And then Daniel McGowan adds, he goes, I should have known then that something was
wrong.
up. But then basically they talk about like, yeah, I think we're good. It's been years since we last did an action and they haven't named us and we were so careful. I think we're good. And so I'm now jumping. Yep. Okay. And so now December 7th, 2005, the FBI pulls off what it calls Operation Backfire. Operation Water Gun, I think, would have been a better name because they all set fires, but Backfire, sure, whatever. Across the country in like 10 different states, the FBI at the same time grabs like a bunch of these members.
Oh, Jesus.
Daniel McGowan is at work because he lives in New York City and he's on East Coast time. But his ex-girlfriend lives in Arizona and gets waken up basically at 5 a.m.
Oh, my God.
And her husband comes into the room and is like, honey, the FBI would like to talk to you for a second.
She's like...
And no, in the moment she says later on in an interview, she goes, I knew immediately what they wanted to talk to me about. Okay, so then that jumps back to all those quotes at the start where he's like, it's ridiculous to call me a terrorist and things like that.
Yeah.
I mean, like what he did strike terror in the hearts and minds of like lumber companies and was property destruction at a huge scale in the millions.
Yeah.
But no one died. And so does your definition of terrorism need death of innocence? Not if you're the FBI. And so...
Interesting.
So they gather everybody. Daniel McGowan is brought to jail. And then his sister basically puts everything she owns up for bail. And so he starts living at her house during the trial. And that's where all those quotes come from.
Okay.
And also, he is... I mean, at this point, he's in his mid-30s, so he's older than that original photo that you just saw.
Okay, yeah.
And he's just like a fuddy-duddy little guy. Like, he's the kind of guy that if you met, you would just know without knowing that he was in a D&D campaign, you know? Like, you would just know Halloween kind of wild probably for him, right? Like, definitely has thoughts on the Lord of the Rings series. Mm-hmm. These people are my friends. This is not an insult. But you don't meet him and you're like, oh, anarchist. You meet him and you're like... He actually, when he gets arrested at work, which is an organization that helps support women escaping domestic violence. So he is like still a bleeding heart liberal, but just like he has a stapler, you know, like he's just an average guy.
Oh.
And they arrest him. And that's when it's important that you remember that quote from the start where he's talking to his lawyers. He was like, do not cooperate. I am not cooperating. All of us, when we were in ELF, talked about how, like, if we got caught, we were never going to cooperate. Because to cooperate was to assume some level of guilt for what we're doing. Yeah. And none of us feel guilty about setting all these places on fire, right? Everyone else just gets kind of sick right beforehand. Okay.
Guilt has no physical manifestation at all, ever.
Right. And then, of course, like a week later, his lawyer is like, okay, well, I just want you to know everyone else was cooperating.
Oh.
And what's so crazy is they're like filming this documentary at this point.
Oh, seriously?
And so you watch him get the phone call and he's like, I think trying to like compose himself because he's on camera. And he goes, oh, man, that sucks. Oh! Meanwhile, his like ex-girlfriend is like, I will name you who and where and why. Tell me quickly, what's your story? Who do you need me to finger? I will do it. She has 2 young kids.
Yeah.
And the FBI is... What do you think the sentencing for these people is? What are they charged with? What kind of punishment are they looking at?
I feel like they would be charged with arson, like destruction of property. Mm-hmm. But I don't know what the sentence would be.
Life in prison times 5.
For each of them?
Correct.
Why?
Right.
They don't charge rapists with that.
Right. And so there's this woman who, years ago, when she was in her 20s, was in an environmental organization that did set fires. That 100% did, and they admit that. But now she's a mom living in Arizona and has 2 young kids.
And now she's facing life in prison.
Right. They were like, you help us for your crimes that created no physical death or harm to anybody, or you will never see your daughters again. So, flashback, Daniel McGowan gets that phone call, and, like, he's obviously devastated.
Yeah.
I mean, these people were still, in large part, his friends, even though he hadn't seen them in forever. He thought they were all going to stand up. I mean, to a degree, it now feels like a betrayal.
Right.
But he's just like this sad, weird little guy.
Yeah.
That's what I wrote in my notes. He's just this sad, weird little guy who does not regret any of his decisions or, like, what he did, but is like, oh, shit. And so his lawyers are like, please cooperate.
Yeah, it'll make life easier for you.
Yeah, and he's like, no, I'm not going to do it. And then, hold on, what's the detail? Okay. One of the reasons why they're facing like multiple life in prison charges is because ELF and its sleeper cells did maybe commit over 1,200 acts of arson in like a 4-year period of time.
Oh my God.
So his family, because he's living at his sister's house. He's on house arrest. He has a little ankle bracelet. His family is like, oh, are you going to go to jail forever? Like, what's going on?
Yeah.
And so his lawyers work out a plea deal to avoid a trial.
Yeah.
It's 2005, but he lives in New York, and so a charge of terrorism is an emotional charge in New York at the time.
Oh, yeah.
And then here's what I said. One person who finally starts to play ball is Daniel McGowan.
Okay.
He won't be giving up any information about his fellow ELF members to the FBI, even though he already knows others are.
Yeah.
But he is willing to take a plea bargain. He will need to plead guilty to his crimes, and if he does, he will be sentenced to 8 years in prison.
Ugh.
However, after that, a federal judge will need to decide if it qualifies for an additional, what they call terrorism bonus. And if they determine that he is a terrorist, he will be sent to a newly built prison just for terrorists. It's 2005. And
I'm sorry, what?
And it will dramatically increase his prison sentence. The fact brings back the original crook of the issue. Who is a terrorist? What ELF had done in terms of property damage was huge in its scale, but actually pretty small when you compare it to like what some companies and organizations do to our planet. You know, Daniel McGowan was charged with like $20 million worth of property damage. But let's even talk about that for a second. I'm not excusing property damage, but if you think about the two groups they targeted government facilities, which were empty, and like the government rebuilt, right? Like no one lost their livelihood because of it.
Right.
And then second, they targeted a bunch of private organizations that were covered by insurance. Arson's a super common thing to be covered by insurance. The lumber company exec they interview is interviewed in his new office built after insurance money. I could understand no insurance company ever wanting to insure Daniel McGowan again.
Yeah.
But like very few people lost their livelihoods and no one lost their lives. And the government is like, the best we will give you is you admit you're a terrorist and you go to a terrorist holding facility.
Jesus.
And so that's, but what's also crazy too is at this point in the documentary, when he has this plea deal and he has to decide what he's going to do, he's not even on house arrest anymore. His like good behavior had demonstrated he wasn't a flight risk, and they take his ankle bracelet off. So it's like, you are either a terrorist and you're a person who can just walk around upstate New York with your family on a vacation, like at the same time. You can take a hike through nature as you figure out if you're going to plea to terrorism charges or not.
What the fuck?
So that's the decision that Daniel McGowan needs to determine, like, what's he going to do?
So what are his two options right now?
Go to trial.
Go to trial.
Take the plea deal.
And the plea deal is admitting he's a terrorist.
Right. And hoping the sentence stays at 8 years, realizing it could be more, and he could be sent to a terrorist facility. Oh, and these terrorist facilities, you are allowed one 15-minute phone call a week and one visit through glass a month.
What?
It's a restricted communication holding cell. So that way terrorists can't continue to communicate with other terrorist organizations. So that's the decision Daniel McGowan has to decide. And I want to pause there for a second to remind you of the crimes of ELF.
Oh my God.
And specifically, the largest act of eco-terrorism to ever be committed in this country. I was wondering if you were going to, do you recognize the date October 19th, 1998 at all?
Nope.
You were alive by then,
Yes,
right?
that was the year I was born.
Okay. So then, no, you won't remember this. ELF sets Vail Resorts on fire.
Holy shit.
In Vail, Colorado.
Yeah.
And it's so destructive, that is what qualifies as the biggest eco-terrorism attack in U.S. history. I saw a little TikTok on that, and I was like, oh, that's going to be a topic. And then I did my research. I was like, not enough for a topic. Oh, but what about ELF? Oh, this is the topic.
That's a topic, yeah.
Okay, so on October 19th, 1998, the city of Vail is woken up by a huge fire on the top of Vail Mountain because the Two Elks restaurant has been set on fire by a sleeper cell of ELF called The Family.
That's terrifying.
It is. It is
That's
actually
a
really
terrifying
funny.
name for an organization.
So
like
here's
that.
a picture of the facility on fire.
Again, steel beams only.
Oh, and those will melt and collapse too.
Yep.
This is early enough on.
God.
So the family a sleeper cell of Elf, actually set several buildings on fire at Vale Resorts. And they knew that instantly when they rolled up that it was arson, because there's like 5 buildings on fire and there's
nothing
no
else
fire
in
connecting
between.
them.
In between.
They're like, oh, this was arson.
Yeah.
Also, it's late October at this point, and it's actually going to be a great snowpack here. And so there's already a ton of snow on the ground around
Yeah.
all of these places.
Yeah.
So the fire's not at risk of spreading. The fire department shows up to try to help fight the fire, but they're like, we're just going to contain it. All of these buildings are way too far gone for us
There's
to save
nothing
them.
for us to save. No one's
Right.
inside. No one's dying.
And so a kind of hallmark of Elf efforts, there was enough snow on the ground that containment was super easy. The fire was not going to spread. But they immediately start to search the scene for like,
Uh-oh.
like
People?
victims and people
Yeah.
or like, suspects. That's
Yeah,
the word.
yeah.
And they come to this outdoor restroom that's heated, and they know that it's a common place for hunters to spend the night if they
Okay.
end up like
Stranded
staying
or
out too long or
something, yeah.
whatever,
Okay,
right?
okay.
And so they find 2 hunters and wake them up and are like, you gotta get out of here and probably go to the police station so we can question you.
Yeah.
Later, when they capture members of the family, one of them admitted that he had opened up the hunting lodge thing
And then-
had seen them sleeping
And didn't set it
and
on fire.
closed it. Well, I don't know if he was going to set it on fire or not, but like they were
At the
sleeping
very
and he
least,
was
he,
like, okay.
Yeah.
Moved on. So this fire is blazing on Vale Mountain. It's a cool moment of like community for these rural Colorado towns because like basically every mountain town sends an engine truck there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They try to get a helicopter to like bring water up to dump it on the
Yeah.
fire. But the air is so thin because it's 11,500 feet in elevation
Yeah.
that the helicopter actually can't get enough force to carry that much water up the hill
Aw.
and like put it
That's
down.
a big problem
Yeah,
for us.
but they do instead use the helicopter to like and infrared goggles to like
Oh,
try
to
to
make sure
scan
that-
the
yeah, okay,
surroundings.
okay.
Can't find anybody because like you don't know. But when it comes to Elf, it's all timed.
Yeah, yeah.
They're not fleeing away after they set fire, babes.
Yeah,
They're long
they're gone
gone by the
before,
time.
yeah,
In
it
fact, the
even
next day, from a Denver library, a woman by the name of Chelsea Gerlach sends a communique from the Denver library claiming responsibility. They said that they were acting against the ski company's planned expansion into Blue Sky Basin, and they were afraid it was going to destroy lynx habitat, which ironically is actually CU Denver's mascot, the lynx. One interesting fun fact, I think. Oh, no, that's the helicopter point. So they set everything on fire. It causes millions of dollars in damage,
Yeah.
in part because it's so hard to rebuild there.
And also, it's Vale.
Right, exactly.
Everything's expensive.
So they burnt down everything, but
Yeah.
like ultimately nothing ended up coming of it.
Yeah.
They rebuilt 2 Elks Lodge. You can eat dinner there now
Yeah,
if you
yeah,
want.
yeah.
They expanded into Blue Sky Basin.
Perfect.
I actually do think it's like a pretty cool run.
yeah.
Also, it was cleared by environmental groups. It was not, Blue Sky Basin was not a primary habitat for lynx. It didn't meet all of the necessary requirements.
Cool.
And so the expansion happened, everything was rebuilt, the lynx still
Are
exists.
fine, yeah.
And nothing really came of it. And in 2005, during Operation Backfire, they captured 4 of the 6 members of the family. 2 of them got off and were on the run. The first made it until 2018. After being on the run for almost 12 years, Joseph Dibby was arrested in Cuba as he was boarding a flight to Russia. He had spent more than a decade living in Syria and Russia. He was arrested, pled not guilty, was tried, found guilty, and in 2022 was sentenced for time served. He was officially charged with arson at the horse processing plant in Caval West.
Okay.
That we talked about earlier, but I do not believe he was charged for the fire in Vale, even though he was like, as part of the family.
Yeah.
They were like, oh, okay, cool. We're just going to kind of charge you for that horse place
Other
that
one.
none of us miss. And thanks for being in jail as we worked that out for like 9 months. And then he was good to go. He lives with his family in Seattle now.
But meanwhile, Daniel McGowan is
In
like
2005
yeah.
is facing forever, maybe execution,
Yeah.
because they think he's a terrorist, right? Not actually, but
Yeah. What the hell?
the final member, and this is now straight from the FBI website,
Yeah.
and I love it. The final member has never been caught. Still, one of the suspects got away. Shortly after Operation Backfire by the FBI, a woman by the name of Josephine Sunshine Overacre fled the U.S. The FBI believes she might be living in Spain, and this is the description they provide for her. Josephine Sunshine Overacre is wanted for crimes spanning 5 states and endangering the lives of first responders. Additionally, for causing $46 million in property damage.
Oh my gosh.
Fluent Spanish speaker. Now it starts to sound like a classified ad. Like,
Yeah.
I'm looking for a girl.
In finance.
6'5",
Likes to set fires.
including mine. Fluent Spanish speaker. She may be using the aliases Lisa Quintana, China, Joe, or Osha. Overacre has facial hair on her upper lip. She is vegan.
Okay, rude.
The alleged arsonist has worked as a firefighter, a midwife, a sheep tender, and a masseuse. There is a $50,000 reward for her.
She sounds like the most peaceful human on the planet. And they're like, we'll give you $50,000 for
If
bringing
you help
in this
us drown
masseuse.
this woman. It sounds like...
Bro, give it up.
It sounds like she was like, okay, well, I hadn't set fires in years, but now that they're arresting all of us, time to follow my passion, which is herding sheep in Basque country.
Yeah, what?
And just looking at the sunset.
Jesus Christ.
So anyways, if you want to turn your weird aunt in who lives in Boulder, $50,000 could be yours.
Not even a full annual salary, so I don't even know if that's worth it for you.
Let's go ahead and wrap this bad boy
Yeah.
up. Okay, let's jump back to our friend Daniel McGowan.
Okay.
Last we talked about him, we were waiting to figure out what he was going to do.
Okay.
He ultimately decides to take the plea bargain, doesn't go to trial, and so now he needs to figure out what the judge is going to do, if they are going to consider him a terrorist or not.
Okay.
The judge sentenced him to 84 months, so 7 years, in prison.
Okay.
They then added the terrorist extender. However, they do not extend his time in jail.
Okay.
So he will still be 7 years.
Okay.
But he is going to be sent to a terrorist holding facility. Additionally, the government will forever name his prosecution as, quote, a successful prosecution of a terrorist. He will officially fall under the mission accomplished banner of suing terrorists.
Guys, there are bigger fish to fry.
It is like right after this that they interview that cop who was like, I think maybe we were too hard. And, and you can tell because goddamn, like 18 years later, they're like, don't do it again.
Yeah,
Time
please.
served.
What?
And so, keep his presence. Yep, I told you about
God.
So he's incarcerated. He goes to jail in August of 2008. He serves 4.5 years and is released to a halfway home in December of 2012 on probation.
Good.
Couple things. First,
When in December?
just December 2018.
I really
Or
hope it
2012,
was
sorry.
12, 12, 12.
1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2.
Just really hope it was that apocalyptic thing and there's someone out there that was like, well, that was the day they released Daniel McGowan.
Makes me think it's like December 8th or whatever.
Yeah.
No, but here's the thing. Okay, so my final two things is Daniel McGowan initially gets sent to a halfway house in like early April.
Okay.
And then he publishes an article, so 2012 coded. He publishes an article in the Huffington Post talking about the complete like violation of constitutional rights that these terrorist holding cells are. And shocker, next day he's arrested again, and the ACLU is like, "Bro, you can't do that. You can't jail journalists." And the FBI is like, "You can't jail journalists."
And then they released.
Fine, yes, like he's back in jail for an day.
The FBI's like,
And now he's like, cool, completely protected. He goes out and talks, and he's like, so one of the things that I did do in my time in prison is meet these other people who are locked up there for the rest of their life because they're accused
Yeah.
of terrorism. And like a lot of them are like people who were running children's charities in some of these places that we extracted them from, which involved like at times like war crimes and like invasions and things like that. But it was like, their organizations were seen as like channeling money to some of these places. And I do think that like sometimes these lines were blurred. It's not like official terrorist group membership card, right? If like you're helping the children of a community and some of those children's parents are, whatever. Or I mean, I think there's like a lot of blurred lines.
That's insane.
And these people will spend the rest of their life in jail.
For doing what they thought was right for their community.
I'm not even talking about people who did terrorism and then were caught for it.
Yeah, they were just like
community members.
Yeah, doing stuff in a place associated with terrorism.
And so my very last paragraph of the story, I kind of love it. Because obviously the documentary ends, you read a couple articles, which are all about like Daniel McGowan's early life all the way up to his arrest in 2005. That's when the documentary gets made too. And so when he gets released in 2012, there's not a lot of like further content about him.
Right.
So this is what I was able to gather. In a truly ironic twist of fate, there is a British businessman also named David McGowan that has made millions in mining. That is obviously not the same guy if you're Googling David McGowan. Honestly, in a full circle moment, and something that I think really highlights how much of an average guy he is.
Yeah.
Daniel McGowan has just the most traditional and regular and low-key kind of boring LinkedIn page. And he has less than 1,000 followers on it. I have no update as to when it was last updated.
That's so funny.
He's just like a guy looking for writing jobs in New York.
Yeah.
Who also spent 4.5 years in a terrorist holding cell. And also set a couple fires in the late 2000s.
How do you look at his rap sheet and are like, yeah, this guy belongs in a terrorist holding cell?
Were there not more movies about him? How is he not like a superhero? Also, Jake Ferguson spent 0 minutes in jail. The one who was the first fire set at the Overland Ranger Station and who set a bunch of fires.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Our system is so
Daniel McGowan.
So good. It's so great.
So friend or foe? Like, I guess technically he is classified as a terrorist, so foe. But no one died, and they actually were super careful to make sure no one died. And even when they started to talk about hurting people, the whole group dissolved. So maybe friend, but also like millions of dollars worth of property damage, so like foe. But also like it was for bad companies, so friend. But also like in a democracy, you can't just set fires if you don't win your way, so foe. But also like they were frustrated with the political process, so friend. But also like you can't like take your ball and go home and then set the house on fire, so foe. And so I thought friend or foe was a great theme for this week.
Easy.
And the way I want to title this episode, like elves, but that wouldn't make any sense at all.
Elves,
whatsoever.
but spelled with an F instead of a V.
I kind of want to call it "We Did Start the Fire," which they admit to.
I mean, that is pretty funny.
And so that's just a quick little tour de force of eco-terrorism or eco-defense. Or sabotage, or muck duck, or whatever you
What
want
was
to call
the
it.
Unabomber's like? He tried to specify between sabotage and
and terrorism.
and terrorism or something like that.
I'll stop blowing up random secretaries. You don't know me, but it's still gonna do sabotage.
Yeah.
Like cutting my own door into my neighbor's home when I'm upset with them. Like I was nuts. In a really funny and scary way.
In a really funny and also kind of relatable way.
But also, like, terrifying way.
But also, he got his book published by, like, threat of violence.
And my friend Sam had to track down his brother in the deserts of West Texas. And so, full circle moment for us.
Yeah.
Huge get.
I know. Did you want me to cut out her last name?
Yeah, probably.
Casey? Maya? Cut
Still
out her last name?
Leave her last name. Yeah. She's a journalist, but I don't know if that's a story that everyone knows or if only some people know.
Yeah.
Love her to death. She's going to be visiting in late June. You know that, right?
I think you've mentioned it, and if I don't meet her, I will be upset.
Lydia and Jacob have never met her. For
That's
years,
iconic.
They thought I was making her up. And then Tyler and Danny met her on a hiking trip once.
I love that.
I do too.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening, friends.
Yeah.
Were you gonna? Or
If you do you?
No, it sounds like you got it. I'm gonna get some cheese.
Please follow us on social media. We're Well I Laughed Podcast on basically everything. If you want to watch the episodes, we're Well I Laughed on YouTube. And then if you want to email us, please email us. If you email us a story that you are willing for us to share, please let us know that you're willing for us to share, and let us know if we can use your name and your pronouns at wellilaughdpod@gmail.com. And if you want more content, we're Well I Laughed Podcast on Patreon.
And allow 2 to 3 business months for us to respond to any of those
To
emails.
literally anything. Because,
And all of those things we just mentioned, we'll have a link to our merch, which is probably definitely going to be live by the time
Did
this
you ask
episode's
for
published.
samples?
Nope. I have not responded to the email at all.
You should ask for samples.
They actually might mention it in the email.
Okay, perfect.
There's like 7 steps, and I was
No,
like,
that's okay.
overwhelmed for the little
That's
minute
okay.
I have
Yeah,
right
yeah.
now. Yeah.
Cool. Okay.
Good. All right.
We
Bye.
love you. Okay, bye.